It began on a quiet morning in Azerim, when a young woman named Nia ventured to the sacred river, unaware that her compassion would set into motion a chain of events that would shake the kingdom to its core. What she thought was an act of kindness, rescuing a drowning stranger, was the spark that would awaken an ancient power, unravel secrets buried beneath the waves, and thrust her into a battle far beyond her understanding. What happened next would see the rise of a forgotten blacksmith, the forging of legendary weapons, and a desperate fight to save not just Azerim, but the entire kingdom. Yet hidden within the depths of the river lay a truth that neither Nia nor her unlikely ally, Danzo, could have foreseen, a truth that threatened to destroy everything they sought to protect. Sometimes, the most dangerous encounters are not with the enemies we know, but the ones disguised as friends. Nia believed she had saved a helpless soul, but instead, she had unleashed a force far more cunning and powerful than she could ever imagine. Before we dive into this tale of courage, betrayal, and redemption, let us know where you're watching from. If you love these kinds of stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Our next story is one you won't want to miss. And if you'd like to support the channel and help us keep creating captivating content, consider buying us a cup of coffee. Your support truly means the world. The sun had barely risen, casting a golden glow over the village of Azerim, nestled by the edge of the sacred river. Nia, a kind-hearted young woman with skin as smooth and dark as polished wood, walked down the winding path toward the river with a clay jar perched on her head. The rhythmic sway of her hips, the soft swish of her feet in the dust, and the chorus of morning birds greeted her with a familiar embrace. Azerim was a small village, quiet and full of simple folk, but the river that flowed through it was a source of power and mystery. No one dared to disrespect it, for the elders whispered that the river was the lifeblood of the gods, and only those with a pure heart could draw from its waters. Nia had always felt a special connection to the river. When she gathered water, she often took a moment to breathe in the cool air and listen to the whispers of the wind, believing it spoke secrets from the world beyond. But today was different. As Nia neared the water's edge, she noticed something strange. There, near the riverbank, something shimmered beneath the surface. It looked like a bundle of shimmering scales, but no fish in the river had ever gleamed with such a glow. Curiosity tugged at her, and she knelt beside the water, her heart racing. At first, she thought it was some kind of rare creature trapped in the shallows, but when she peered closer, she saw it was a woman, her long hair dark and flowing, tangled like seaweed, her body half submerged in the water, and her eyes wide open, glowing with an unnatural light. The woman's skin, slick and glistening, was adorned with shimmering scales that sparkled like precious stones. Her lips were blue, and she appeared to be struggling to stay afloat. Nia gasped, her heart aching with sympathy. The woman's breaths were shallow, and her face twisted with fear. Without thinking, Nia dropped her jar and reached out to help. She stretched her arms toward the woman, and with surprising strength, she hauled her from the river's grasp. The woman's body was heavy, her skin cold like that of a fish, but Nia didn't care. She dragged her to the riverbank, panting from the effort. As she lay the woman down on the soft grass, Nia took a step back, her eyes wide in amazement. The woman's eyes fluttered, and she coughed, expelling water from her lungs. "Thank you," the woman whispered, her voice soft and melodic, like the sound of wind through reeds. Her glowing eyes fixed on Nia's with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. Nia didn't know who the woman was, but she could feel an undeniable bond between them. Without a second thought, she gathered the stranger in her arms and carried her home, ignoring the uneasy feeling growing in her chest. She had no idea what she had just brought into her life. Nia's cottage stood at the far end of Azerim, tucked away in a small grove of trees. Its mud walls were weathered by time, and the roof was made of thick, dried palm fronds that rustled in the breeze. The scent of smoke from a small fire that Nia kept going in her hearth filled the air, mixing with the sweet smell of herbs and the rich, earthy fragrance of the surrounding forest. The inside of the cottage was simple but comforting, a bed covered with a patchwork quilt, a few shelves with dried fruits and herbs, and a small, handmade table where Nia prepared her meals. She had lived here for many years, far from the bustle of Azerim's village center, preferring solitude and the quiet peace of the trees. But tonight, the peace she had always known felt distant. The woman, Adiz, had been heavy in Nia's arms, her skin cold and her body trembling. Nia had struggled to keep her balance as she carried the strange woman through the winding paths, her heart hammering with confusion and fear. The path that led to her cottage was dim, with only the moonlight to guide her way. As she crossed the threshold, the weight of what she had done settled on her shoulders, but there was no turning back. Nia gently laid Adiz on her bed, carefully removing her wet clothes. The mermaid's skin shimmered faintly in the dim candlelight, her long hair a wild, tangled mass of darkness. Nia noticed that Adiz had an ethereal, almost otherworldly beauty. It was as if the moon and the stars had been woven into her very being, and though Nia had seen many strange things in her life, nothing had been quite like this. For a while, Adiz simply lay there, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Nia busied herself around the cottage, preparing a small fire and placing a pot of water on the hearth. But as she worked, her thoughts wandered back to the strange woman in her bed. She couldn't help but wonder who Adiz really was. Was she some kind of spirit from the river, or something more? The questions seemed endless. Eventually, Adiz stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, glowing softly in the dim room. She turned her head toward Nia, her lips parting in a quiet, pained smile. "You've saved me," Adiz said, her voice hoarse but full of gratitude. "I was lost in the river. I thought I would never see land again." Nia sat beside her, her hands nervously wringing together. I couldn't just leave you there," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But who are you, really? I've never seen anyone like you before." Adiz's eyes darkened, and for a moment, a shadow passed over her face. "I am a being from the depths of the river," she said slowly. "I am not like the others who live above the water. I come from a world far below, one that humans have long forgotten." Nia's heart raced. "You're a mermaid?" she asked, trying to piece together the strange feeling that had settled over her. Adiz nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving Nia's. "Yes," she whispered. "But my story is more complicated than that. I am not just a creature of the water. I have been forced to flee from my home, and now I am here, in your world." Nia listened intently, her curiosity growing with each word. She didn't fully understand the gravity of what Adiz was saying, but there was something about the mermaid that intrigued her, something both captivating and mysterious. "What happened?" Nia asked, her voice gentle. "Why were you in the river?" Adiz hesitated for a moment, and Nia could see the pain in her eyes. "I was hunted," she said, her voice soft but with a hint of bitterness. "My world, the kingdom of the deep sea, is a place of great power, but it is also a place of treachery. I stole something that was not meant for anyone to take. And now those who rule the depths are chasing me, wanting it back." Nia's brow furrowed. "What is it that you took? What is so important?" Adiz's gaze grew distant, as if she was seeing something far away. "It is an artifact, a powerful object that holds the balance of both land and sea. It was never meant to leave the water. But I took it to change things, to save those who needed it." Nia's mind spun with confusion. "And now they are after you?" "Yes," Adiz said softly. "And now that you've found me, they will come after you too." Nia felt a chill run down her spine. She had unknowingly become part of something much larger than herself, something that could change the very fabric of their world. But as Adiz's words sank in, a sense of responsibility filled Nia's heart. She had saved this woman, and now she couldn't turn her back on her. "I will protect you," Nia said, her voice resolute. "No one will harm you here." Adiz's eyes softened, and she smiled, a smile full of both gratitude and sadness. "Thank you, Nia. But there is more you must know. The artifact's power is not just a blessing. It is a curse, and it will bring both of us great danger if we do not handle it carefully." Days passed, and Nia's life began to change in subtle ways. Adiz's presence in her cottage was both comforting and strange, and as the mermaid grew stronger, Nia began to notice a shift in herself. The strange energy she had felt that day at the river seemed to follow her, growing stronger with each passing moment. Adiz would often sit by the window, gazing out toward the river. Her eyes seemed to see something beyond the trees, beyond the horizon. And sometimes, Nia would catch her murmuring words, soft, cryptic words that she didn't understand. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Adise turned to Nia with a knowing look in her eyes. "You are growing stronger," she said, her voice low. "The river is awakening something within you. It is a gift, but also a challenge. You must learn to control it." Nia stared at her, confused. "Control what?" "The power that lies within you," Adise explained. "It is a power born of the river, one that has been passed down through the ages. It has been hidden in your bloodline, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And that moment is now." Nia's heart raced as she processed Adise's words. She didn't understand how any of this was possible, but deep down, she could feel the truth of it. There was something within her, something powerful and ancient. "But how do I control it?" Nia asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Adise smiled, her glowing eyes softening. "Trust yourself," she said simply. "The power will guide you. All you must do is listen." And so, Nia began to practice, alone in the quiet of the forest, by the river's edge, and in the silence of her cottage. She focused, trying to connect with the power she felt stirring inside her. And though it was hard at first, there were moments when she felt it, like a current running through her veins, like the river itself was flowing inside her. One evening, as Nia stood by the river, she felt the power surge through her with a force that almost took her breath away. She closed her eyes and let it flow, letting it guide her hands as she lifted a stone from the ground, holding it in the air as if it were weightless. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for the first time, she felt truly alive, truly connected to the world around her. Nia's heart raced as she stood by the river, the stone floating in midair, hovering above her outstretched hands. Her breath came in shallow bursts, as if the power surging through her was too great to contain. The moonlight shimmered on the water's surface, casting long shadows over the ground, but all Nia could focus on was the energy pulsing inside her, raw, untamed, and dangerous. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The river's gentle flow slowed, the wind ceased its whisper, and the leaves on the trees hung motionless in the night. Nia's hands trembled slightly as the stone hovered higher, and she could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. It was as if the entire forest was watching her, waiting to see what she would do next. But then, with a sudden flicker, the stone dropped from her hands, crashing to the ground with a sharp thud. Nia staggered back, her head spinning, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She felt the power within her recede, like a wave pulling back from the shore, leaving her trembling and weak. She collapsed onto the ground, her hands clutching the earth beneath her as she tried to regain her composure. Sweat clung to her brow, and her body felt heavy with the strain of whatever force she had just tapped into. "Nia." Adise's voice broke through the silence, and Nia turned to see the mermaid rushing toward her from the shadows of the trees. Her glowing eyes were wide with concern as she knelt beside Nia. "Are you all right?" Nia nodded weakly, but she couldn't speak. Her mind was still reeling from the sensation of power that had overwhelmed her. She had never imagined that something so incredible could be inside her, let alone that she would have the ability to control it. The stone, which had been so heavy and solid just moments ago, now seemed so insignificant. "You did well," Adise said softly, her voice full of pride. "But you must be careful. The power you've awakened is not something to be taken lightly. It will take time to master." Nia closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill her lungs. "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaky. "How is this possible? How did this power come from me?" Adise's expression softened, her eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "You are more connected to the river than you realize, Nia," she said, her voice a soothing balm. "The river's magic flows through your bloodline. It has always been there, waiting for the right person to awaken it. That person is you." Nia looked at Adise, her mind swirling with questions. "But why now? Why is it awakening now?" Adise stood, her glowing eyes flicking toward the distant horizon. "Because there is much at stake. The artifact I stole, it is more powerful than you can imagine. And the forces that seek it are drawing closer. The power you carry, Nia, is not just for your own survival. It is part of a much larger battle, one that you are now a part of." Nia stood slowly, her legs still weak, but her determination growing stronger. She had never asked for any of this, but now that she was caught in the currents of fate, she couldn't turn away. The village of Azarim, the river, Ades, and now this mysterious power, it was all too much to ignore. "I don't know if I'm ready," Nia admitted, her voice full of doubt. "I've always been just a simple peasant. I don't know how to fight wars or wield magic." Ades smiled, her eyes softening with sympathy. "You don't have to fight the war alone. The magic is within you, yes, but it is also tied to the world around you. You are part of the river, Nia. You are part of the earth. And that will give you the strength to do what is needed." Nia nodded, but the weight of Ades' words lingered in the air. There was no going back now. Whatever had begun that fateful day by the river was now her responsibility. "I will help you," Nia said, more to herself than to Ades. "I will do whatever it takes to protect Azarim, to protect you, and to stop whatever is coming." Ades' eyes glowed brighter, a flicker of something like hope dancing in their depths. "You are stronger than you think, Nia. The power is inside you. All you need is to believe in it." As the night deepened, Nia stood by the river with Ades, her heart a mixture of fear and resolve. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: her life would never be the same again. Meanwhile, in the royal castle of Azarim, far from the quiet of Nia's cottage and the mysteries of the river, another life was being changed. Danzo, the humble blacksmith, worked tirelessly at his forge, his hammer striking the hot metal in rhythmic blows. The air was thick with the smell of burning coal and the crackling of the fire. His muscles ached from the hours of labor, but his work was unappreciated, and his heart was heavy with unspoken dreams. The king's soldiers would occasionally pass by, but they never stopped to admire the fine craftsmanship of Danzo's work. His swords, his shields, his spears, they were beautiful, strong, and finely made, yet no one seemed to notice. The king had many blacksmiths, and Danzo was just another face in the crowd. But all of that was about to change. One day, as Danzo was finishing a new blade, a royal messenger appeared at the door of his workshop, his eyes filled with excitement and urgency. "The king requests your presence," the messenger said, his voice breathless with excitement. "He has heard of your work. Come quickly." Danzo's heart leaped in his chest, disbelief flooding his senses. The king had heard of him. After all these years of toiling in obscurity, could it be that he was finally going to be noticed? Without hesitation, Danzo followed the messenger through the winding paths of the castle, his thoughts racing. As they neared the royal courtyard, he saw the king standing before a group of his soldiers, his regal robes shimmering in the sunlight. The king's eyes were sharp and calculating, his expression unreadable. "Danzo," the king said, his voice deep and commanding. "I have heard much about your work. And I am impressed. You will create a set of weapons for me, weapons unlike any the world has ever seen." Danzo's heart raced. "Your Majesty, I will do my best," he said, bowing low. The king smiled, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. "Good. These weapons must be perfect. They will help us win the war against our enemies." Danzo's mind spun with the weight of the king's request. He had never made weapons of war before, but he knew that with the right materials, and perhaps some guidance, he could create something truly magnificent. But as he looked into the king's eyes, something tugged at him, an unease, a sense that he was being pulled into something far greater than he could comprehend. Little did he know, the forces of the sea were already beginning to stir, and soon, he would be caught in a battle not just for his kingdom, but for the very balance of the land and the ocean. Back at Nia's cottage, the days that followed were filled with a growing sense of urgency. The moonlight seemed to shine brighter, casting shadows that danced across the trees as if the world itself was on edge. Nia's mind was heavy with questions, each one piling onto the other, like stones in a basket. Ades had warned her about the artifact, the powerful object she had stolen from the depths of the sea. According to the mermaid, this artifact was not just a relic of immense power, it was a key to controlling the balance of both land and water. In the wrong hands, it could bring about untold destruction. But in Nia's hands, or those of someone else with the mermaid's blessing, it could also bring unimaginable strength. For days, Nia had not seen the artifact itself, and she grew increasingly curious. Adiz had only spoken of it in cryptic terms, saying that it was something that could change the course of history, but never explaining how or why it had such power. Nia wanted to ask more questions, but the mermaid had become distant, withdrawn into herself as though she was hiding something. Every now and then, Adiz would gaze toward the river, her expression full of longing and regret. One night, as Nia was preparing a meal over the fire, she noticed that Adiz was not in her usual spot by the window. She searched the small cottage, calling out softly, "Adiz, where are you?" When no answer came, Nia's heart began to race. She rushed outside, calling again, her voice rising in concern. The sound of the river's current grew louder as she reached the edge of the forest. Suddenly, she saw a figure by the water, Adiz, standing at the riverbank, her back to Nia. The mermaid's glowing eyes were fixed on the water, and her long, dark hair swirled in the wind. "Adiz," Nia called, her voice trembling with worry. "What's going on? You've been so distant lately. Are you hiding something from me?" The mermaid turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "Nia," she said softly, her voice filled with a deep sorrow. "There is so much you do not understand. I have been trying to protect you, to keep you safe from the dangers that come with this artifact. But it is too late now. The forces are already on the move." Nia's heart pounded in her chest. "What forces? What are you talking about?" Adiz's eyes glowed faintly, and for a moment, Nia saw something flicker in her gaze, a mix of fear and regret. "The artifact is not just a key to power," she whispered, as if speaking to herself. "It is a lure, a beacon that calls to those who seek dominion over all. And there are others who want it, who will stop at nothing to get it." Nia felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Who? Who would come after us?" Adiz hesitated, her voice low. "It is the Sea King and his followers, warlords from the depths of the ocean. They will not rest until the artifact is returned to them. And if they find it, the world as we know it will be forever changed." Nia took a step forward, her mind racing. "But what does all this mean for me? For Azarim?" Adiz's eyes softened, but there was a hardness to her voice. "The artifact's power does not belong to either the land or the sea. It belongs to the one who can control it. And that person is you." Nia blinked in confusion. "What do you mean? How can I control it?" Adiz lowered her gaze to the river, her expression troubled. "I told you, Nia, you are connected to the river. But there is more, much more. You carry the blood of the ancient ones, the river's true children. The power within you is tied to the artifact. If you unlock its secrets, you can shape the fate of the world." Nia took a deep breath, her mind swirling with the weight of Adiz's words. She had already been changed by the power of the river, but this was a level of responsibility that she hadn't been prepared for. The sound of galloping hooves broke the silence, and Nia turned to see a rider approaching from the village. It was one of the royal messengers. He was a young man, his face grim with worry. "Nia," he called urgently. "There's trouble at the castle. The king has sent for you." The royal messenger's words sent a shockwave of fear through Nia. She had only heard rumors of the kingdom's growing unrest, whispers of war and violence spreading through the land, but she never imagined that it would reach her so soon. Without a word, Nia followed the messenger, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel Adiz's eyes on her, but the mermaid said nothing, merely watching as Nia left the cottage and walked toward the village. The ride to the royal castle was swift, and as Nia approached the towering gates, she felt a knot of unease form in her stomach. The castle was not a place for ordinary villagers like her, and the grandeur of the towering stone walls and the opulent courtyard only made her feel smaller. She had been here before, but never as someone of importance. The royal guards, recognizing the messenger, parted to allow them entry. Nia followed the young man through the castle's vast halls, her steps echoing off the marble floors. They arrived at the king's throne room, where a large group of royal officials and soldiers were gathered, their faces tense with worry. King Azari sat upon his throne, his regal presence commanding attention. His piercing eyes locked onto Nia as she entered the room. He motioned for her to approach, and the silence in the room grew thick with anticipation. "Nia, daughter of the river," the king said, his voice deep and steady, "you have been summoned because we have reason to believe you know something important. We are at the brink of war, and I need to know what you know about the artifact of which you have heard. It is said that you have crossed paths with the mermaid, Adise. What do you know of her?" The weight of his gaze made Nia feel as if the walls were closing in around her. Her throat tightened, but she stood tall. She could feel the power within her, pulsing, urging her to speak the truth. But could she? Could she tell the king everything she knew about Adise, the artifact, and the danger that loomed over them all? Nia's mind raced. She could not lie. She had never been one for deceit, and now, in the face of such immense power, she could not falter. I know that Adise is not just a simple traveler," Nia began, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "She is a mermaid, a creature from the depths of the river. And she carries with her an artifact, one of great power. The artifact must not fall into the wrong hands, for if it does, it could bring ruin to both the land and the sea." The king's face remained expressionless, but his eyes narrowed. "You speak of things that sound like the legends of old, Nia. Tell me more. What exactly is this artifact, and why do you think it could bring ruin?" Nia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment press upon her. She was no longer just a peasant woman, she was a part of something much larger than herself. The choice she made here could shape the future of the entire kingdom. "The artifact is an object of incredible power," she said, her voice unwavering. "It can control the balance of both worlds, the land and the sea. I don't know its full nature, but I do know this: Adise is not just hiding from her own people. She is trying to keep the artifact out of the hands of those who would use it to destroy everything we hold dear." The king stood, his expression turning grave. "Then we are in far greater danger than we thought." The air in the throne room was thick with tension. Nia's heart hammered in her chest as the king's gaze bore into her, his expression unreadable. The royal officials and soldiers stood silently around her, waiting for the next move. The enormity of the situation seemed to crush down on Nia, but she stood her ground. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about the fate of Azarim, the artifact, and the looming threat that threatened to tear everything apart. King Azari's voice broke the silence, his tone low and commanding. "If what you speak is true, then we must act swiftly. The enemies we face will stop at nothing to gain control of that artifact, and if they do, the power they wield will destroy everything we've fought to protect." Nia nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I understand, Your Majesty. But there's something else you need to know, something I've only just learned myself." The king motioned for her to continue, his sharp gaze never leaving her. "The mermaid, Adise," Nia began, her voice steady, "is not just a fugitive running from her people. She is connected to the artifact in ways I don't fully understand. She's been trying to protect it, but also to keep it hidden. She didn't tell me everything, but I know this: there are dark forces out there, forces from the depths of the sea, that want the artifact for themselves." The king raised an eyebrow, intrigued yet skeptical. "And you believe Adise has been keeping this power from us, from the kingdom?" "I don't think she meant harm, Your Majesty," Nia said quickly, her voice full of conviction. "But I believe she's been protecting herself as much as she's been protecting the artifact. There's a great danger in keeping something so powerful hidden away." The king stood tall, his face grim as he processed Nia's words. His voice was measured, heavy with the weight of the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. "We must act, then. I will send word to the kingdom's generals and prepare for whatever is to come. The mermaid's artifact must be found, and we must secure it before our enemies do." As the king turned to his officials, giving orders for the defense of the kingdom, Nia was dismissed. But even as she left the throne room, a sense of unease gnawed at her. She had spoken the truth, but now she feared that the very forces she had warned the king about were already moving against them. Days passed, and the kingdom of Azarim seemed to buzz with a nervous energy. The royal soldiers fortified the walls of the castle, and preparations for war were underway. But the deeper Nia got into the king's plans, the more she sensed something was wrong. The urgency of the situation had clouded their judgment, and they were moving too quickly, too recklessly. It was as if they were playing into the hands of the very enemies they sought to defeat. One evening, as Nia walked through the village, she felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The wind had shifted, carrying with it a strange scent, salty, thick, and oppressive. The river, which had once been a place of peace, now seemed to whisper in tones of warning. As Nia approached her cottage, her thoughts were interrupted by a low, rumbling sound in the distance. It was unlike anything she had ever heard, a deep, guttural noise that seemed to come from the very earth beneath her feet. Her heart skipped a beat, and she instinctively looked toward the river. There, standing at the edge of the water, was Adise. But this time, she wasn't glowing with her usual ethereal light. Instead, her features were shadowed, her face etched with fear. Her eyes, once full of mystery and power, now looked haunted. "Nia," Adise called, her voice trembling. "You must leave the village. Now." Nia froze. "What's happening? What's going on?" Adise looked over her shoulder, her gaze darting nervously. "They're here. The warlords of the deep. They've come for the artifact." Nia felt a cold shiver run through her. "But how? We haven't even found the artifact yet." Adise's eyes locked with hers, desperation filling her gaze. "They don't need to find it, Nia. They know where it is. And they've come to take it by force." Before Nia could respond, the ground beneath her feet trembled once again, and the air seemed to grow thick with tension. In the distance, she could hear the unmistakable sound of drums, loud, rhythmic beats that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth. The warlords were coming. "We don't have much time," Adise said urgently. "The artifact is what they want, but they will destroy everything in their path to get it. You must take the artifact before they do, Nia. You're the only one who can." Nia felt the weight of Adise's words press down on her. The responsibility that had been slowly building over the past weeks now seemed too great to bear. How could she, a simple peasant, be the one to carry the burden of an artifact that could change the world? But as the drums grew louder, Nia knew there was no turning back. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm with resolve. "I'll find the artifact and stop them." Adise nodded, her expression filled with both pride and sadness. "I knew you would, Nia. But you must hurry. The warlords have the power of the deep at their command, and if they find the artifact first, it will be too late for all of us." Without another word, Adise turned and disappeared into the shadows of the forest, leaving Nia standing at the river's edge, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. The night was dark as Nia made her way toward the heart of the kingdom, her every step filled with purpose. The sounds of the warlords' drums echoed in the distance, a constant reminder of the urgency that filled the air. The villagers had already begun to flee, abandoning their homes for the safety of the castle, but Nia had a different mission. She had to find the artifact, and keep it out of the hands of the warlords who would use it to destroy everything. As she approached the castle gates, she was stopped by a royal guard. "Where are you going, Nia?" he asked, his face filled with suspicion. "The king has ordered that no one leave the castle." "I need to find something," Nia said quickly, her voice tight with tension. "Something the kingdom needs to survive." The guard hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" Before Nia could explain, the sound of hooves galloping toward the castle echoed from the darkened road. A rider appeared, his silhouette outlined against the moonlit sky. It was Danzo, the blacksmith, his face grim as he pulled his horse to a halt. "Nia," he said, his voice low. "I've heard about the warlords. The king needs your help. You can't do this alone." "I don't have time to explain," Nia said, her voice filled with urgency. "I need to find the artifact before they do." Danzo's eyes softened with concern. "I can help. I know the castle better than anyone, and I know where the artifact is hidden. But we must hurry. The warlords are closing in." Nia hesitated, her mind racing with doubts. But deep down, she knew that Danzo, with his knowledge of the castle's secret passages, was the only one who could help her now. "All right," she said, her voice resolute. "Let's go. We don't have much time." Together, they turned and hurried toward the castle, the sound of the warlord's drums growing louder with each passing moment. The night was growing colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer, but Nia knew one thing for certain: the battle for the artifact had begun. Nia and Danzo hurried through the castle's grand gates, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The castle was unusually quiet for such a tense time, and the absence of the usual bustle made the place feel even more foreboding. As they navigated through the stone corridors, Nia's mind raced. The king's palace had never felt like a home to her, but now, with danger so near, it felt even more alien, more imposing. Danzo led the way through the labyrinthine hallways, his sharp eyes scanning the shadows. His familiarity with the castle's layout was their only hope in finding the artifact before the warlords did. "The king has already sent out the royal guard to reinforce the outer walls," Danzo explained quietly as they moved. "But they won't stand a chance against the warlords. We need to get to the vault under the castle. That's where the artifact is kept, hidden away in the depths of the fortress." Nia nodded, trying to focus on their mission. She could feel the weight of what was to come pressing down on her, but she couldn't allow herself to be distracted. Adiz had given her a task, and there was no turning back now. The mermaid's words echoed in her mind: "You are the one who can control it. You must take the artifact before they do. The fate of the kingdom rests in your hands." They arrived at a narrow, unmarked door at the far end of a corridor. Danzo turned to Nia, his expression serious. "Through here. This is the entrance to the hidden passage," he said, pushing the door open. It creaked ominously as they stepped inside, and a sudden chill filled the air. The passage was small, just wide enough for them to walk side by side. It twisted and turned, winding its way downward deep beneath the castle. The dim light from their torches flickered on the damp walls, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and move as they walked. Nia felt a strange, eerie sensation as they descended, as though the very stones of the castle were watching them. "Do you feel that?" Nia whispered, her voice tight with apprehension. Danzo nodded. "It's the magic of the artifact. The closer we get, the stronger it becomes. We need to hurry." Nia could sense it now, the air growing heavier, charged with an unseen force. It was as though the walls themselves were alive, resonating with the power of the artifact hidden deep below. The passage became steeper, and Nia's legs burned with the effort of climbing down. At last, they reached the bottom, and before them stood a large, ornate door. The door was made of ancient wood, reinforced with metal bands that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Carvings of mythical creatures, serpents, birds, and sea monsters, were etched into the surface. A strange symbol, resembling a spiral, was emblazoned at the center of the door. "This is it," Danzo said softly, stepping forward to examine the door. "The vault." He pressed his hand against the symbol, and with a deep, resonating groan, the door slowly creaked open, revealing the inner sanctum of the castle's deepest vault. The room inside was vast and cold, with stone walls lined with shelves holding ancient scrolls, artifacts, and relics long forgotten by most of the kingdom's inhabitants. But at the far end of the chamber, bathed in an eerie, pulsing glow, was a pedestal. On it rested the artifact. The artifact was an object of haunting beauty. It was an orb, glowing with an ethereal light that flickered and shimmered like the surface of the river at dawn. It was no larger than a man's hand, but its presence filled the room with an overwhelming sense of power. The moment Nia laid eyes on it, she felt something stir within her, a deep, primal recognition, as if the artifact had been calling to her all along. "Is that it?" Nia whispered, her voice filled with awe. Danzo nodded grimly. "That's the artifact. The Sea King's most coveted treasure. And now, it's our responsibility to keep it from falling into the wrong hands." Nia took a step forward, but as she did, the ground beneath her feet trembled. The air around them thickened, and a low, rumbling noise filled the room. It was a warning, a sign that the warlords were close, perhaps already within the castle walls. "We don't have much time," Danzo said urgently, his voice rising. "We need to move." Nia's heart raced as she approached the pedestal. She felt a strange pull toward the orb, a magnetic force drawing her closer. As her fingers brushed against the smooth surface of the artifact, a sudden surge of energy coursed through her body. Her mind flashed with visions, images of the sea, of ancient kingdoms, and of power beyond anything she had ever imagined. The orb pulsed once, and in that moment, Nia understood. She understood the truth of Adi's words. She understood the artifact's true nature. It's not just a weapon, Nia whispered in realization. It's a key. A key to something far greater. Danzo, who had been watching her closely, stepped forward. What do you mean? Nia looked up at him, her face pale. This artifact can control the sea itself. The power it holds is beyond anything we can imagine. It's not just a tool to fight with, it's a force of nature. And if the Sea King gets his hands on it, he will control both land and sea. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside the vault. Nia and Danzo exchanged a glance. Someone was coming. We have to go, Danzo urged, pulling Nia away from the pedestal. Now. They turned to leave the vault, but as they did, the door slammed shut with a loud crash. Nia spun around, her heart leaping in her chest. No, she shouted. We can't be trapped in here. But it was too late. The rumbling noise grew louder, and the walls of the vault began to shake as if they were alive. The sound of 1,000 footsteps reverberated through the stone, and the heavy thuds of warlord soldiers filled the air. They found us, Danzo said, his voice tense with fear. We need to get out, now. Nia's mind raced. She couldn't let the warlords have the artifact. She couldn't let them bring the kingdom to its knees. But how could they escape? Then, from the depths of her memory, she recalled something Adiz had said, the artifact will show you the way, if you have the courage to follow. Nia's pulse quickened. Courage. She needed courage. The artifact was not just an object, it was a power that could guide her. But only if she trusted it. In that moment, Nia knew what she had to do. With her heart pounding, she closed her eyes and placed both hands on the orb. She focused on the river, the flow of water, the currents, the waves. She could feel it, like a distant heartbeat calling to her, a rhythm she had known since childhood. Suddenly, the walls of the vault began to pulse with light, the air crackling with energy. The ground beneath their feet shifted, and with a loud, explosive sound, the stone door to the vault burst open. A rush of wind and water surged into the room, flooding the space with the energy of the artifact. Nia's eyes flew open in shock, and she saw, standing in the doorway, the shadowy figures of the warlords. But they were too late. The artifact had shown her the way. The door to the vault crashed open with a deafening roar. The warlords, tall and fierce, stood in the entrance, their faces twisted with malice and greed. Their eyes locked onto the artifact, now glowing brighter than ever, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Nia could feel the power pulsing in the air, resonating through her very bones. But something had changed. The artifact was no longer just an object. It had become an extension of Nia herself, and she could feel its power surging within her. The air around her shimmered with energy, and for the first time in her life, she felt invincible. The warlords hesitated, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Their leader, a tall man with dark, piercing eyes and a crown of coral, stepped forward. His voice was like the sound of crashing waves. You have no idea what you are meddling with, peasant, he growled. That artifact belongs to the Sea King. It is the key to ruling the oceans, the land, and the sky. And we will take it from you, whether you like it or not. Nia stood her ground, her hand still gripping the artifact. The pulsing energy seemed to thrum with her heartbeat, its power now flowing freely through her veins. You will never control it, Nia said, her voice steady but filled with a newfound authority. The artifact will not bend to your will. It belongs to no one, and I will protect it. Danzo, standing beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder. His eyes were wide with both awe and fear. Nia, you've done it. You've unlocked its power. Nia nodded, though the weight of what she had just done was beginning to settle in. The artifact had chosen her, and now she could feel its connection to the depths of the sea, the endless, powerful currents that no one could tame. The warlord leader sneered. Foolish girl. Do you think you can stop us? We have the strength of the seas behind us. You cannot defeat us." Without warning, the warlord's soldiers surged forward, their movements quick and practiced. They raised their weapons, swords, spears, and nets, and advanced on Nia and Danzo with lethal intent. But Nia was ready. The moment the warlords moved, she raised the artifact high above her head. The room seemed to shake with energy as the artifact's light intensified, casting long, twisting shadows across the vault. Nia felt the pulse of the sea, the waves, the tides, the storms, and she released it all. A wave of force, as powerful as the ocean itself, exploded outward from the artifact. It struck the warlords like a tidal wave, knocking them off their feet and sending them crashing into the walls. The soldiers flailed, their weapons flying from their hands, as the very ground beneath them seemed to buckle and shift. The vault trembled as if it were about to collapse, but the power of the artifact held everything in place. The warlord leader, who had been momentarily stunned, rose to his feet, his eyes burning with fury. "You cannot do this," he spat, his voice filled with rage. "The Sea King will destroy you for this." Nia stepped forward, the artifact still glowing fiercely in her hands. "I will not let you destroy this kingdom. The Sea King has no power here." For a moment, the warlord leader looked uncertain, his confidence faltering as he faced the force of Nia's power. But then, with a roar, he lunged at her, his hands outstretched to take the artifact. Nia reacted without thinking. With a swift motion, she raised the artifact once more, and in an instant, a column of water shot up from the ground, enveloping the warlord in a whirlpool of rushing waves. The water spun around him with incredible force, binding him in place, trapping him in its current. The warlord leader struggled, his face turning purple from the pressure. But Nia focused, her eyes narrowing as she concentrated on the water's flow. Slowly, the whirlpool began to shrink, pulling the warlord down into the earth beneath the castle, until he was swallowed up by the very ground. The vault fell silent, the warlord's soldiers too stunned to move. Danzo looked at Nia in awe. You did it," he whispered. "You stopped them." Nia didn't answer immediately. Her mind was still reeling from the overwhelming force of the artifact's power. It had been as if the sea itself had answered her call, her will had become one with the artifact. The connection was so deep, so powerful, that she could feel the ocean's pulse, its tides, and its vastness, all within her. But with that realization came a new understanding. The artifact had chosen her, not just as a protector, but as a conduit for its power. She could feel the weight of that responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She wasn't just guarding an artifact anymore, she was the keeper of a force that could reshape the world. "Nia," Danzo said, his voice shaking slightly. "What happens now? What do we do with it?" Nia looked down at the artifact in her hands, still glowing faintly, its power simmering beneath the surface. She could feel its magic, raw and untamed, and she knew the time had come for her to make a choice. "We can't keep it here," Nia said quietly, her voice filled with certainty. "The artifact belongs to the sea, and it's too dangerous to stay in the hands of anyone, kingdom or warlord. We need to return it." Danzo nodded, his expression grim but understanding. "To the river?" "To the river," Nia confirmed, her voice resolute. "That is where it belongs. That is where it came from." But as Nia turned to leave, she heard the sound of footsteps once more. This time, it wasn't the warlords. It was something else, something far more ominous. A figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the light of the vault. It was Adiz. But this was not the Adiz that Nia had known. The mermaid's form shimmered with an unnatural glow, her eyes now an unsettling shade of gold, glowing with a fierce, predatory light. She was no longer the kind and grateful creature Nia had rescued from the river. The air around her was heavy with a dark, oppressive energy. "You should not have done that, Nia," Adiz said, her voice cold and distant. "The artifact was never meant to be returned. It was meant to be used, to shape the world into something new." Nia's heart dropped. "What do you mean?" "You said." "I lied," Adiz interrupted, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "I didn't want you to know the truth. The artifact is not a tool for good. It is a weapon that could allow me to rule both the seas and the land. And you, Nia, you've handed it to me. Danzo stepped forward, his fists clenched. No. We won't let you take it. We'll stop you. Adi's eyes flickered with a dark smile. You are too late, blacksmith. The artifact's power is already mine. You have no idea what I can do with it. Nia's heart raced as Adi's advanced, her aura pulsing with dangerous power. The mermaid had been playing them all along. The final battle for the artifact was about to begin. The air in the vault grew colder as Adi's presence intensified. Her glowing eyes flickered like embers in the darkness, and the energy surrounding her seemed to warp the very fabric of the room. Nia could feel it, a suffocating weight, as though the very walls of the castle were closing in on them. Danzo stepped in front of Nia, his face hard with determination. You won't get away with this, Adiz. The artifact belongs to no one. It's a force of nature, not a tool for power. Adiz laughed, a low, melodic sound that sent a shiver down Nia's spine. Oh, how naive you are, blacksmith. You think I need this artifact to rule? You think it was ever about the artifact itself? Nia's stomach tightened. What are you talking about? Adiz's golden eyes gleamed as she tilted her head, a cruel smile playing at the corners of her lips. The artifact is not the key to my power. It's a catalyst, a gateway. It's not just an object to control, it's a doorway to the deeper magic of the sea, and to the heart of the ancient kingdoms. It was never about keeping the world in balance. It was always about reshaping it to my will. Nia's heart pounded in her chest. The words made sense, but they were terrifying. She had been used, again. Adiz had never truly been her ally. The mermaid had only helped her because she had known the artifact's true purpose all along, and Nia had unknowingly been the key to unlocking it. You lied to me, Nia whispered, the weight of betrayal sinking in. All this time, you used me. Adiz's smile softened, but it was far from comforting. I didn't lie, Nia. I just withheld the truth. I never wanted to hurt you. But I had to make sure you understood the magic of the artifact fully. I needed you to awaken it, to see its potential. The realization hit Nia like a thunderclap. The artifact wasn't just a simple object of power. It was a conduit for something much greater, and Adiz had known from the start that it would lead her to this moment. The mermaid hadn't been a helpless victim rescued from the river, she had been playing a long game, manipulating events from the shadows, pulling the strings until she had what she wanted. Danzo clenched his fists. You used Nia to get to the artifact. To bring this kingdom to its knees. Adiz turned her gaze on him, her expression cold. I didn't use her. I guided her. She was always meant to be the one to bring the artifact to me. Nia's mind raced. She could feel the power of the artifact, still glowing in her hands, but now it felt different, more dangerous. The artifact's magic had always been a mystery, but Adiz's words were unraveling the truth. What do you want from us, Adiz? Nia asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. You have the artifact. Why not just take it and leave? Adiz's eyes darkened. Because the artifact alone is not enough. I need the kingdom's forces to bend to my will. I need the power of the sea and the land to merge into one. Only then will I be able to fulfill my true purpose. What is your true purpose? Danzo asked, his voice filled with suspicion. Adiz stepped closer, her movements graceful and fluid. I was once a princess of an underwater kingdom, one that was destroyed by greed and corruption. I sought the artifact to restore my people, to bring them back to life. But I realized that I could do more than just save my kingdom. I could remake the world. I could make it mine. Nia's blood ran cold. The truth was worse than anything she had imagined. Adiz wasn't just a mermaid fleeing her past. She was a conqueror, a power-hungry ruler who would stop at nothing to achieve her goals. Nia took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. The artifact was still in her hands, and it was as if it were calling to her, urging her to take control. But Adiz was too dangerous. The mermaid had manipulated her, and now it was time to make a choice. "You can't have it, Adise," Nia said, her voice firm. "The artifact is too powerful to be used for selfish gain. It's a force of nature, not a weapon to be wielded." Adise's smile faded, replaced by a look of pure fury. "You still don't understand. The artifact is mine by right, and I will stop at nothing to take it. You are nothing but a pawn in a game you don't even understand." Without warning, Adise lunged at Nia, her hands crackling with dark energy. The air around her shimmered as if the very space was bending to her will. Nia barely had time to react as Adise's fingers grazed her arm, sending a jolt of energy coursing through her body. The power of the sea surged through her veins, but instead of lifting her, it seemed to weigh her down, sapping her strength. Danzo, quick as a flash, threw himself between Nia and Adise, his hammer raised high. "Stay away from her." Adise barely glanced at him. With a flick of her wrist, she sent Danzo flying backward, his body slamming into the stone wall with a sickening thud. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious. "No!" Nia cried, her heart leaping in fear for Danzo. But before she could act, Adise turned her attention back to her, her golden eyes glowing with unbridled fury. "You should have stayed out of this, Nia," Adise hissed. "Now, you will witness the true power of the artifact." The mermaid raised her hands, and the artifact pulsed with an intense, blinding light. The walls of the vault began to shake as the magic in the air grew stronger, the ground beneath them trembling with the force of the power being unleashed. Nia felt the pull of the artifact, its power trying to drag her in, to bend her will to its control. But she fought against it, focusing on the river, on the calm currents that had once been her solace. She remembered the peace of the water, the way the river had always flowed freely, unconstrained. That was the true nature of the artifact, not a weapon, but a balance. With all the strength she could muster, Nia pushed back against the force of the artifact. She focused on her connection to the river, to the natural flow of water and life, and with a single, desperate cry, she shattered the hold that Adise had over her. The vault exploded with light. The explosion of light was blinding, like the sun erupting from the very earth. Nia's entire body was filled with a sharp, electric current that made her muscles scream in protest. For a moment, she could see nothing but the bright blaze of the artifact's power, shimmering and pulsing in the center of the vault. The force seemed to expand, filling the air with crackling energy. But then, as quickly as it came, the light began to fade, leaving behind a deep, resonating silence. Nia blinked, her vision swimming as she tried to orient herself. She felt her body tremble, but there was something different now. The artifact's power, which had once felt like a storm, had calmed, like the stillness of the ocean after a tempest. She gasped as the vault came back into focus. Adise was standing across from her, but she no longer looked like the confident, powerful mermaid who had manipulated her. Instead, she seemed smaller, more vulnerable, her once glowing eyes dimmed, as if the light had been sucked out of her. Nia's heart pounded in her chest as she realized what had happened. She had done it, she had broken the artifact's grip on her. The artifact wasn't just a conduit of power, it was a living force, and by aligning herself with the river's calm, Nia had managed to regain control over it, even if only for a moment. Adise's expression twisted into one of disbelief and rage. "What have you done?" she hissed, taking a step forward. Nia's voice was steady, despite the tumult inside her. "I've freed us from the artifact's control. It isn't a tool to be wielded by anyone, it belongs to the river, to the sea. It's not meant to be used for power or domination." Adise's lips curled into a sneer. "You think you've won, Nia? This was never about control. You were always just a pawn in a game far larger than you could ever understand." She extended her hand, and the air around her seemed to warp, twisting into a vortex of dark, swirling water. "You still don't see it, do you?" Adise's voice was colder than ice. "I've already won." Before Nia could react, Adise flung her hands forward. A massive wave of water shot out, crashing toward Nia like an unstoppable tide. It was like a storm had unleashed itself, water surged from all directions, moving faster than Nia could blink, pulling her toward the center. The wave struck her with a force that knocked the breath from her chest. She felt herself being dragged under the current, her legs kicking helplessly as she struggled to keep her head above the water. The vault around her disappeared, replaced by an endless sea of churning waves. Nia's heart raced as she tried to fight against the current. She could feel the power of the artifact still within her, but this was no longer the tranquil river she had once known. This was the storm that Adise had summoned, a storm of her own making, filled with the chaotic energy of the sea. But as the water closed around her, Nia remembered the advice that had come from the mermaid, cryptic though it had been. The sea's power is not to be feared, for it is the heart of all things, life and death, creation and destruction. It is the balance that holds the world together. With those words in her mind, Nia closed her eyes and focused. She reached out, not with force, but with understanding. The storm around her seemed to quiet as she found herself sinking deeper, deeper into the heart of the sea, into the pulse of life that flowed through the very fabric of the world. The water, once chaotic, became still, like a river in the midst of a dream. Nia breathed deeply, sensing the rhythm of the world, its balance, and she whispered, "I am the river. I am the sea." At that moment, the artifact, still glowing faintly in her hands, responded. The magic of the artifact no longer felt like an overwhelming force, but rather a part of her, woven into her very being. It was not a power to dominate, but a power to understand, to guide, to bring balance. The storm surrounding Nia began to subside, the water retracting as if it had never existed. Adise, who had once seemed so powerful, was now left standing in the midst of an empty vault. Her face twisted with disbelief, her golden eyes flickering with fury and frustration. "No." Adise snarled, her voice filled with venom. "You can't." But Nia wasn't listening anymore. She had seen the truth. Adise had used the artifact to try to control the seas and the land, but in the end, it was the balance between the two forces that truly held power. And Nia, for the first time in her life, felt like she understood that balance. "You've lost, Adise," Nia said, her voice calm but full of resolve. "The artifact isn't yours to command. It's part of the world, part of nature. It is not a weapon." Adise took a step back, her hands trembling. "You think you can defeat me with such foolishness? You think you understand the artifact's power?" She laughed, but it was a hollow, bitter sound. "You have no idea what you're up against, Nia. You have no idea what the artifact can do." But Nia's resolve was unwavering. "I do know. It's not about power. It's about harmony. The artifact wasn't meant to be used by anyone. It was meant to keep the balance." Adise's expression faltered for a moment, as if the truth had struck her, but then her face hardened once more. "You are a fool. The world will crumble under your naive ideals." With a final, furious gesture, Adise raised her hands once more, but this time, Nia was ready. As the mermaid summoned another surge of dark water, Nia raised the artifact high above her head, channeling the calm of the river, the stillness of the sea. The artifact responded, glowing with a bright, steady light, and in an instant, the storm vanished, leaving nothing but a serene silence in its wake. Adise fell to her knees, her shoulders shaking. "You don't understand," she whispered, more to herself than to Nia. "I was only trying to bring my people back. To restore them." Nia took a step forward, her voice soft but firm. "And I understand that, Adise. But the path you chose was wrong. The artifact doesn't bring life by force. It brings balance by respect. You cannot control the seas, not anymore." The mermaid's gaze softened for a fleeting moment, as though for the first time, she saw the truth of what Nia had said. But it was too late for redemption. The damage had been done, and the artifact's power was no longer hers to command. With a final, mournful look, Adise vanished into the depths, her form dissolving into the air, leaving Nia and Danzo standing in the now empty vault. Danzo stirred, groaning as he sat up. His face was bruised, but he was alive. "Nia. What happened?" Nia turned to him, her heart swelling with relief. She reached out to help him to his feet. "It's over. We've stopped her." Danzo looked around, his eyes wide with amazement. "But the artifact, how did you do it?" Nia smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. I didn't do it. The river did. The sea's power isn't for domination. It's for balance. As the vault grew silent once more, Nia realized that her journey had only just begun. There were still many questions, many paths to follow. But for the first time, she felt at peace. The storm was over. The balance had been restored. The silence in the vault hung heavy, like a cloak over Nia's shoulders. The faint glow from the artifact flickered, but now it felt less like a beacon of power and more like a soft pulse, a heartbeat in sync with the world around her. Danzo, still catching his breath, glanced at Nia with a mixture of awe and concern. Nia, you've done something no one could have imagined, he said, his voice hoarse. But what happens now? What do we do with the artifact? Nia took a long, steady breath, her mind still racing with everything that had just unfolded. She could feel the weight of the artifact in her hands, but it didn't feel like it had before. It didn't hold the promise of power, nor did it feel like an ancient weapon meant for destruction. It was simply an object. An object that held an undeniable connection to the forces of nature. A connection that had once been twisted, but now, with Adis gone, seemed to be returning to its rightful place in the world. I don't know what we do with it, Nia replied honestly. But I know it can't stay here. The power it holds is too great, too dangerous to be used by anyone, whether in the hands of Adis or anyone else. Danzo nodded, his expression grim. And yet, we can't just leave it in the open. There will always be someone who will want to control it. Nia looked at the artifact again, her eyes narrowing with deep thought. I know. But perhaps it's time to return it to the river, where it belongs. The sea was never meant to be controlled. It is a force that moves on its own terms. Just like the artifact. The thought felt right, resonating deep in her heart. Nia had always felt a connection to the river, but now, that connection was stronger than ever. It was as though she, too, had become part of its flow, a part of something much larger than herself. She could hear its whisper in the back of her mind, urging her to return the artifact to where it had come from. But will returning it to the river be enough? Danzo asked, uncertainty in his voice. Will it really be safe? Nia turned to face him. The river will protect it. The sea is ancient and wise. It will know what to do. What matters now is that we don't let anyone else seek to claim it for their own. The world can't be ruled by such power. It must remain in harmony. Danzo looked at Nia, as if seeing her in a new light. You're right. You always were right, Nia. I've been caught up in all this, thinking that my weapons, my fame, would save the kingdom. But in the end, it's balance that matters. It's understanding. A soft breeze seemed to carry his words away, but Nia knew they had touched something deep within her, too. She had been so lost in the whirlwind of events, the danger, and the twists of fate, but now she felt something else, clarity. She had done more than simply stop Adis, she had opened her eyes to the true meaning of power. I never asked for this, Nia said quietly, looking down at the artifact once more. I never wanted to be a part of all this, to hold such responsibility. But now, I know what I must do. The sea is calling me. It's calling us. Danzo nodded in agreement, his eyes focused on the horizon, as if sensing the pull of the river himself. Then let's return it. Together. They walked out of the vault, the stone corridors of the castle feeling oddly empty now. The heavy air that had once seemed oppressive now felt lighter, as though the very weight of the kingdom's struggle had lifted. The tension that had pervaded the walls seemed to dissipate, replaced by an unfamiliar stillness. Outside, the kingdom stretched before them, its high towers, its bustling market streets, and the far-off, glistening river. The sacred river. The very lifeblood of the land, and now the key to restoring balance. As they approached the riverbanks, Nia's heart raced again, but not from fear or uncertainty. It was the pull of something ancient, something powerful. The river was calling to her. She could feel its pulse in her veins, its rhythm in the air around her. The artifact in her hands grew warm, as though it recognized the river, too, and was ready to return to its rightful place. Danzo stood silently by her side, watching her with a mixture of awe and reverence. "Are you ready, Nia?" he asked softly. Nia took a deep breath, feeling the river's cool breeze brush against her face. "I'm ready." With a single, fluid motion, Nia raised the artifact above her head and tossed it into the river. The moment it hit the water, the river seemed to stir, its current swirling around the artifact with incredible force. The water shimmered with an otherworldly glow as the artifact was pulled beneath the surface, disappearing into the depths. For a moment, there was nothing but stillness. The river seemed to hold its breath, and Nia held her own, waiting. And then, a single, gentle ripple spread across the water, the ripples growing wider and wider, as if the river itself had accepted the artifact, had welcomed it back home. A sense of peace washed over Nia. She had done it. The artifact was where it belonged. And in doing so, she had restored balance to the world. Danzo stepped closer to her, his voice quiet but filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Nia. You saved us all." Nia shook her head, her eyes soft. "I didn't save anyone. I just listened. The river knew what to do. We just had to let it guide us." They stood there for a long moment, watching the river flow quietly beneath the setting sun. There were no more storms, no more warlords. Only the peaceful flow of water, carrying the artifact into the depths where it could rest in harmony with the world. But Nia knew that the world was never truly free of conflict. There would always be those who sought power. And there would always be those who needed to protect the balance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Nia felt a sense of resolve settle within her. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. There would be more battles to fight, but she knew she wasn't alone. The river, the sea, the balance of life, they were all with her. The calm of the river at twilight was deceiving. While the sun had set and the world had momentarily quieted, Nia knew the balance she had fought so hard to restore was only temporary. The artifact was gone, yes, but that did not mean the world had been healed. There would always be forces that sought to control power, that craved domination, that feared change. Still, standing by the river's edge, Nia felt a weight lift off her chest. The artifact was no longer in the hands of Hades, nor in the kingdom's vaults. It had returned to the water, where it could never again be wielded by any mortal hand. "Do you think it's truly gone?" Danzo asked, his voice breaking through Nia's thoughts. He stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the flowing waters, still uncertain, as if the river could somehow play tricks on them. Nia nodded, her gaze soft but resolute. "The river will keep it safe. It's no longer part of the world above the water. We won't find it again." Danzo watched the ripples stretch across the surface, reflecting the stars that were beginning to twinkle above. "And what now? What happens to us? To the kingdom?" Nia hesitated, feeling the weight of his question. The truth was, she wasn't entirely sure. The battle had been won, but at what cost? Hades' manipulations had caused more than enough destruction, and Nia couldn't help but wonder if there were still remnants of that conflict lurking in the shadows. But the river had shown her the way. It had taught her something vital, that power was not to be controlled, but understood. That the balance between the land and the sea, between the forces of nature and humankind, was delicate and required care. "We rebuild," Nia said finally, her voice steady with purpose. "We rebuild the kingdom, but this time, it has to be different. We can't let power corrupt us. Not again. We must learn to live in harmony with the world, as we should have always done." Danzo turned to look at her, a new kind of admiration in his eyes. "You're right. I've spent so much time forging weapons, creating things to fight with, that I forgot the true strength lies in the bond we share with the land and the people." Nia smiled faintly. "Weapons have their place, but they're not the answer to everything. There's more to this world than what we can fight with. The strength we need is in understanding one another, in protecting what we have." Danzo nodded, absorbing her words. "And you? What about you, Nia? What will you do now?" Nia took a deep breath. "I don't know. I think it's time I stop running from who I am. I've been caught up in so many things, trying to fix problems I didn't even understand. But now I feel like I finally know my purpose." The river seemed to respond to her words, its water swaying gently. Nia closed her eyes for a moment, allowing the sound of the flowing water to wash over her. The river had always been her guide, and it would continue to be. She had learned from it, not just in the quiet whispers of the night, but in its depth, its timeless wisdom. "I will go to Azarim," Nia continued, her decision forming with clarity. "The village where I was born. The people need someone who can show them a different way. Not just as a healer or a peasant, but as someone who can help them see the bigger picture, the balance between nature and the land. I think that's where I belong now." Danzo's expression softened, and for the first time in what felt like ages, he smiled. "I'll help you. If you're going to Azarim, I'll go with you. Together, we can teach them what we've learned." Nia's heart warmed at the thought. Danzo had always been a good man, steadfast, strong, but sometimes too eager to solve problems with force. Together, perhaps they could change things. Perhaps they could bring harmony to a kingdom that had long been caught in the cycle of war and strife. As they stood there by the river, watching the moonlight glisten on the water, Nia realized that the future was not set in stone. It was hers to shape. And she could choose to make it one of peace, of understanding, of balance. But that didn't mean the road ahead would be easy. As they walked away from the river, a nagging feeling tugged at the back of Nia's mind. Adiz had not been the only one who sought the artifact's power. There would be others, warlords, rulers, mercenaries, who would stop at nothing to reclaim what was lost. The artifact was gone, but its legacy remained. And there would be those who remembered its power, who would be willing to do anything to harness it once again. It had been several weeks since Nia and Danzo had left the castle and made their way back to Azarim. The kingdom was in the process of rebuilding itself after the turmoil of the past months. There was no more talk of war or conquest. The people were tired, exhausted from the constant fighting. They were ready for peace, ready to heal. But not everyone was content with this new direction. One evening, as Nia sat by the small fire in the village, tending to the simmering pot of soup, she felt a strange chill in the air. It wasn't a cold wind, but something deeper, something unsettling. She looked up, her gaze scanning the quiet village. Danzo, who had been helping the villagers with their daily tasks, paused in his work as well, sensing something off. "Do you feel that?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. Nia nodded, her fingers tightening around the spoon she held. "Something's wrong. It's too quiet." Just then, the sound of footsteps broke the silence. It was a lone traveler, cloaked in dark, tattered robes. He approached them cautiously, his hood drawn low over his face, obscuring his features. His steps were measured, deliberate. "What do you want?" Danzo asked, stepping forward, his hand instinctively moving toward the sword he kept at his side. The traveler raised a hand, signaling peace. "I'm not here to fight," his voice was rough, as if unused to speaking aloud. "I come with a warning." Nia's heart skipped a beat. A warning. Her instincts told her this was no ordinary traveler. The men looked around nervously before speaking again. "The artifact you threw into the river, it hasn't been forgotten. There are those who seek it still. And they won't stop until they find it." Nia's blood ran cold. "Who are they?" she demanded, her voice sharp. The traveler hesitated, his eyes darting about as though searching for something in the distance. "I don't know their names, but they come from all corners. They know the power the artifact once held, and they will not rest until they reclaim it." Danzo took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "How do you know this? Who are you?" The traveler paused, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of his knowledge had exhausted him. He pulled back his hood, revealing a gaunt, worn face, his eyes dark with years of sorrow. "I was one of them. One of the men who searched for the artifact, until I saw what it did to us. The hunger it created. The destruction it caused. I fled, but I fear it is too late for me. They will find me, and when they do, they will make sure I lead them straight to it." Nia's heart raced. The danger was far from over. The artifact may have returned to the sea, but its legacy was alive, and with it, the shadow of those who would stop at nothing to reclaim its power. Nia stared at the traveler, her mind spinning with the implications of his words. The artifact had been thrown into the river, its power hidden away beneath the water, but now it seemed that its legacy was far from gone. The men before them had been part of those who once sought its power, and now he was warning them of a much larger danger, one that reached beyond the borders of Azerim and the kingdom. Danzo was the first to speak, his voice hard. "What do you want from us? If you were part of the group that sought the artifact, why should we trust you?" The traveler winced, as if the question pained him. "I know you have no reason to trust me," he said, his voice strained. "But I'm not here to deceive you. I fled because I saw what the artifact could do. It didn't bring us power, it brought us madness. It twisted our minds. There's a group of mercenaries, warlords, and power-hungry individuals who formed a faction. They've been searching for the artifact ever since it disappeared, and they'll stop at nothing to reclaim it." Nia felt a deep unease settle in her chest. She had hoped that throwing the artifact into the river would be the end of it. She had thought the kingdom could finally begin to heal, that the peace they so desperately needed would come. But now it seemed that the shadows of the past were beginning to catch up with them, threatening to undo everything they had worked for. Danzo crossed his arms, his brow furrowed. Who are these people? Why would they want to seek out an artifact that's hidden away in the river? The traveler glanced nervously over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to appear out of the darkness. The artifact is no ordinary object. It's an ancient source of magic, a power that can change the course of history. Those who seek it believe that they can control not just the land, but the very forces of nature itself. With that kind of power, they could conquer kingdoms, enslave entire populations, and rule both the sea and the land. Nia felt a shiver run down her spine. The traveler's words had a chilling ring of truth to them. The artifact had been dangerous in the wrong hands, and Adiz had already proved that. But if these mercenaries and warlords were as determined as he said, the peace they had fought for would be fragile and fleeting. "What can we do?" Nia asked, her voice steady but filled with concern. The traveler took a deep breath, his eyes darting nervously as he looked around them again. "You need to leave Azerim. The danger here is growing. They're coming for the river. They'll try to dredge it up, search its depths until they find what they seek. You have to leave and go somewhere far away, where they won't find you." Danzo shook his head. "You expect us to run? After all that's happened?" "No, we stay and fight. We protect this kingdom. We protect the river." The traveler's face softened with a trace of sorrow. "I understand your courage, but it's not enough. These people are not to be trifled with. They've been searching for the artifact for years, and now that they know it's in the river, they will stop at nothing to claim it." Nia could see that the traveler's words had struck a chord with Danzo. He was a man of action, but even he knew when the odds were too great to overcome. For a long moment, the two of them stood in silence, the weight of the decision settling heavily on their shoulders. Nia could feel the tension in the air, the pressure mounting with every second. Finally, Danzo spoke, his voice resolute. "I will not run. If they want the artifact, they'll have to go through me first." Nia turned to him, her eyes wide with concern. "Danzo, you don't understand. The artifact is not something we can fight with swords or weapons. We can't defeat them with violence." "I know that," Danzo replied, his voice firm. "But we can protect the kingdom. We can warn the people. We can gather allies. Together, we'll stand strong." Nia hesitated, torn between the desire to protect her home and the need to ensure that the artifact's power did not fall into the wrong hands again. She looked back at the traveler, who was watching them with a mixture of sadness and urgency. "Is there any way to stop them?" she asked quietly. The traveler's face hardened, his eyes darkening. "There is one way, but it's dangerous. You'll have to go deep into the river, deeper than anyone has ever gone. You'll need to find the heart of the river." Nia raised an eyebrow. "The heart of the river? What is that?" "It's a place of great power," the traveler explained, his voice low. "It's said that whoever controls the heart of the river can command the waters themselves, and with it, they can stop anyone who tries to claim the artifact. But getting there, it's not something anyone can do lightly. The river is not a place of peace. It's a living force, and it will test you. Nia felt a knot form in her stomach. The idea of venturing into the depths of the river, into the unknown, was both terrifying and alluring. She had always felt connected to the river, but she had never imagined it held such secrets. Danzo spoke up again, his voice determined. "We'll do it. If the heart of the river is the key to stopping this, then we'll find it. Together." Nia glanced at him, torn between her fear for their safety and her desire to end this threat once and for all. She couldn't shake the feeling that this journey, if they chose to take it, would lead them into the very heart of the river's mystery, and perhaps, into a deeper understanding of the artifact's true nature. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "I can go alone." Danzo shook his head, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering resolve. "No, Nia. I'm with you. We do this together." The traveler nodded in approval, though his face remained somber. "It's the only way. But beware, the river will test you. It will challenge your very soul. Only those who are pure of heart can find the heart of the river and control its power." As the traveler spoke those final words, a cold wind swept through the village. The once peaceful night now felt heavy with foreboding, and Nia realized that the path ahead would not be easy. The journey to the heart of the river would be dangerous, but it was the only way to ensure the safety of the kingdom, and to protect the world from the horrors that the artifact could unleash. The next morning, as the first rays of the sun began to break over the horizon, Nia, Danzo, and the traveler prepared for their journey. They gathered supplies, saying their goodbyes to the villagers who wished them well but feared what might lie ahead. Everyone knew that the search for the heart of the river was fraught with peril, and that those who had ventured into the depths before had never returned. Danzo, ever the practical one, carried a large pack with provisions, dried meat, water skins, and tools for survival. Nia, on the other hand, carried little more than a satchel with healing herbs and a small dagger she'd kept at her side for protection. She wasn't sure what awaited them in the river, but she knew she would need more than physical tools to survive whatever lay ahead. She would need her wits, her connection to the water, and the courage to face whatever challenges the river might throw at them. The traveler, whose name they still did not know, was leading the way, his eyes scanning the horizon for signs of danger. "We need to reach the river's edge by nightfall," he said. "The journey ahead is long, and the river's trials are unpredictable." Nia took one last look at Azarim, the village she had called home for so long. The river that ran through it was the lifeblood of the land, and it seemed to pulse with both power and mystery. There was no turning back now. They were committed to finding the heart of the river, and stopping the enemies who sought the artifact. With a final glance at the village, Nia turned and followed the traveler. They began their trek toward the river, unaware of the challenges and dangers that awaited them in the depths below. The path to the river was long and winding, cutting through dense forests and rugged terrain. Nia, Danzo, and the mysterious traveler moved in silence, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth beneath them. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the weight of the journey pressed down on them, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead gnawed at Nia's mind. For the first time in a long while, she found herself feeling vulnerable. She had always trusted the river, had always felt a sense of comfort and connection when she was near it. But now, as they journeyed deeper into the wilderness, she couldn't shake the feeling that the river, her river, was hiding something from her. The traveler's warning about the river's trials lingered in her thoughts, and she wondered if it was truly capable of testing their hearts. The air grew heavy with an odd tension, as though the very land around them was holding its breath. It wasn't long before the traveler broke the silence, his voice low and cautious. "Be prepared," he said. "The river does not take kindly to intruders. It will show you what it wants you to see, not what you expect. Stay true to yourselves, and trust in the bond you share with the water. If you falter, if you let fear cloud your judgment, the river will take advantage of it." Danzo, ever the skeptic, gave a short nod but didn't speak. He was focused, his eyes sharp and alert. Nia, on the other hand, felt the weight of his words sink into her chest like a stone. The river was not just a body of water, it was alive, it had a spirit, and it had its own desires. By the time the sun began to dip low on the horizon, they had reached the river's edge. The once familiar sight of the water now felt foreign, its depths darker than she had ever seen them before. The surface was smooth, almost like glass, but Nia could feel the energy pulsing beneath it, a low hum that seemed to vibrate in her very bones. The traveler stepped forward, looking out over the water with a furrowed brow. This is where the journey begins. From here, the river will guide us, or it will drown us. Danzo glanced at Nia, his brow furrowed. Are you sure this is the right path? We can't turn back now. Nia swallowed hard. The fear in his eyes mirrored her own, but she knew that they had no choice. The fate of the kingdom, of the artifact, and perhaps even of their own lives depended on what happened next. This is the only way, Nia said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty within her. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening breeze on her skin. We need to trust the river. The traveler, sensing her resolve, nodded. The river will show us the way, but we must enter it willingly. Only then will we begin the trial. Follow me. He stepped into the water, his feet making soft ripples in the otherwise still surface. Nia followed him, with Danzo close behind, as they waded into the cool current. The water felt almost alive, swirling around them as if greeting them with open arms. Nia couldn't help but feel a strange comfort, even as the river seemed to draw them deeper into its embrace. With each step, the sound of the world around them began to fade. The chirping of the crickets, the rustling of the leaves, the calls of distant birds, all became distant echoes, as though the river was pulling them into a different realm entirely. The only sound now was the soft whisper of the water as it lapped against their legs, the quiet hum of something ancient and powerful beneath the surface. After a few moments, the traveler stopped and turned to face Nia and Danzo. His face was grim. This is the first trial, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We must remain calm. The river will test us by showing us our deepest fears. Do not look away. Do not let the fear take hold. Trust the water. Nia nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She could feel it now, the change in the air, the subtle shift in the current, as if something was watching them. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself, trying to focus on the sound of the river, the rhythm of the water against her skin. Suddenly, the water surged around them, and Nia gasped as she felt a sharp pull on her body. She stumbled, almost losing her footing, but Danzo caught her arm and steadied her. The river's surface began to ripple violently, and from the depths, strange shapes began to emerge. Shadows that twisted and stretched in unnatural ways, forming distorted figures. Faces that seemed familiar, but their eyes were wrong, empty, void of emotion, as if they had been drained of all humanity. Nia's heart skipped a beat as she recognized one of the figures. It was her mother. But something was terribly wrong. Her mother's face was twisted in a grotesque expression, her mouth gaping open in a silent scream. Nia felt the coldness of terror grip her chest, and she took a step back, her body trembling. No, Nia whispered, her voice shaking. This can't be real. This isn't real. The figure of her mother reached out to her, its hands clawing through the water, its eyes wide with an expression that was neither pain nor anger, but desperation. Nia's breath hitched in her throat. Don't listen to it, the traveler's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to see him standing still, his expression stern. It is not your mother. It is a manifestation of your fear. A trick of the river. Ignore it. Nia forced herself to focus, to steady her breath. Her mother had passed away years ago, and yet here she was, or at least an illusion of her, reaching out from the water. It was the river testing her, pushing her to confront the pain she had buried deep inside. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, forcing the fear away. The image of her mother began to fade, dissolving into the water like mist. But the river was not done. Other shapes began to emerge, new fears, new nightmares. Danzo was not immune to the river's trial either. He too staggered back as figures from his past rose from the water, people he had wronged, enemies he had killed. Their faces twisted in anger, their voices echoing with accusations. Nia, he called out to her, his voice strained. This is too much. I can't. But Nia was already reaching for him, her voice firm and unwavering. Danzo, focus. They're not real. You can't let the river control you. With a visible effort, Danzo closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Slowly, the figures receded, and the water around them grew still once again. The traveler, his face pale but composed, nodded in approval. The first trial is complete. The river tests us by showing us what we fear most, and when we overcome it, we prove ourselves worthy. Nia felt a deep sense of relief wash over her, but she knew the trials were far from over. The river had shown them only the beginning of its power. Whatever came next would be even harder. Are you ready for the next trial? The traveler asked, his voice low and steady. Nia took a deep breath. She was shaken, but she was determined. She had come this far, and she would not falter now. Yes, she said, her voice steady despite the lingering fear. We're ready. Danzo nodded beside her, his face grim but resolute. The river's surface remained still, as if waiting for their next move. But beneath the surface, the current was shifting, waiting to test them again. The air around them felt thick, almost oppressive, as the river's trials continued to unfold. Nia, Danzo, and the traveler stood still in the cool water, their hearts pounding in their chests, the eerie silence surrounding them. The river had already shown them their deepest fears, memories of lost loved ones, past mistakes, and unresolved regrets, but Nia knew that this was only the beginning. The traveler, his face drawn tight with focus, turned toward the water again. The second trial is one of temptation. The river will offer you what you desire most. It will try to turn your heart, make you stray from your purpose. You must resist it. Danzo's jaw clenched, and Nia could see the unease in his eyes. This trial would be harder than the first, she knew. Fear was one thing, but temptation had the power to sway even the strongest heart. The river began to change. The surface, once still and dark, began to shimmer with a golden light. Ripples spread across the water, like fingers of light reaching toward the shore. Nia's breath caught in her throat as a soft, lilting voice echoed from the depths. Nia. Danzo, come closer, you are meant for greatness. Nia felt a strange pull, an urge to step forward, to wade deeper into the glowing water. The voice was soft, inviting, and it promised something more than she had ever dreamed. She could feel it in her bones. The river was offering her power, fame, the kind of respect she had always wanted but never received. The voice whispered her name again, coaxing her toward it. Come to me, Nia. Take what you deserve. No one will ever underestimate you again. Her chest tightened as the voice called out to her, and for a moment, she almost took a step forward. But then, she remembered the promise she had made to herself. She was not here for power. She was here to protect her people, to stop the warlords, and to stop the destruction that the artifact had brought into the world. Nia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She reached out with her mind, grounding herself in the knowledge that the river was testing her, tempting her with illusions that would only lead to ruin. She had to resist. No, she whispered, shaking her head. I don't want what you offer. I want peace for Azerim. The golden light seemed to dim, and the voice faltered, but then it grew louder, more insistent. You are weak, Nia. The river knows you. It knows your heart. It knows your desires. But Nia clenched her fists and pushed the voice out of her mind. She thought of the villagers, her family, her friends, and the peace they had fought for. She thought of Danzo, who had trusted her to stand by him, and the kingdom they were trying to protect. That was what truly mattered, not the empty promises of power. The golden light finally began to fade, and the voice fell silent. Danzo, too, had been caught in the river's snare. His eyes were wide, and he was standing stock still, as though frozen in place. The water around him swirled with a deep, dark red hue, and a low, rumbling voice echoed from the depths. Danzo, you've worked so hard, sacrificed so much. You deserve the glory. You deserve the throne. No one else will recognize your worth. But I can give you the power to rule the kingdom. Nia's heart raced as she turned to him, seeing the same struggle in his eyes. Danzo had always been a man of action, driven by the desire to protect those he loved, but this temptation, it was something far more dangerous. It offered him everything he had ever dreamed of: recognition, power, and perhaps even the throne. Would he succumb to the river's voice? Nia stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Danzo, listen to me. This is not what we're here for. We're here to protect Azerim, to stop the warlords, not to seize power for ourselves. He shook his head, blinking as though waking from a trance. I almost, his voice trailed off, his gaze flickering to the river. The red hue slowly receded, and the water returned to its dark, quiet state. The traveler watched them both, his face tight with intensity. This is the second trial, the trial of temptation. It will always come when you least expect it, when the promises of power are most alluring. You must be vigilant. The river will always try to offer you what you desire, but you cannot let it cloud your judgment. Danzo exhaled sharply, his eyes still haunted by what he had almost given into. I almost lost myself, but you're right. This is not the time for that. Nia placed a hand on his shoulder, offering him a silent show of support. They had made it through the second trial together, but they knew that the path ahead would be even harder. The river was not finished with them yet. The traveler turned, his eyes scanning the water again. We must move forward. There is no time to waste. The third trial is the most dangerous of them all. Danzo and Nia exchanged a look, understanding the gravity of the situation. They were closer now to the heart of the river, closer to the final trial that would determine whether they were worthy of its power. But they knew that the trials were not just about strength or courage, they were about the heart, the spirit, and the resolve to stay true to their purpose. Without another word, the traveler led them onward, deeper into the river, where the water grew colder, and the pressure of the trials seemed to intensify with every step. As they moved deeper into the river, the air grew thicker, colder, and more oppressive. The water seemed to pull at their limbs, trying to slow them down, to make them falter. Nia could feel the pressure building, the weight of the river's power pressing against her, testing her resolve. The river was alive, and it was watching them. The traveler's voice cut through the silence, low and urgent. This is the final trial. The river will show you the truth of your soul, and it will ask you to make a choice. You must decide who you are, and what you are willing to sacrifice. Nia swallowed hard, her throat dry. She didn't know what the river would show her, but she knew it would be something that would force her to question everything she had believed in. Danzo stepped forward, his expression hard. What kind of choice? The traveler's eyes darkened, his voice heavy with warning. The river will show you a vision of the world as it could be, your dreams realized, your deepest desires fulfilled. But it will come at a cost. A great cost. Nia's heart raced. She could already feel the river pulling her, calling her to a place where she could see the future, see what could be. Would she be able to resist the temptation to accept that future, even if it meant losing everything she cared about? Danzo's voice broke through her thoughts. I'm ready. Whatever the river shows me, I will make my choice. Nia nodded, feeling the cold water close around her, as if the river was wrapping its tendrils around their very souls. The time had come. She had no choice but to face what lay ahead. The water swirled violently around them, the current pulling at their bodies as the river's power surged, pulling them into the final trial. The water seemed to shift, becoming more turbulent as if it were alive, pulling at Nia and Danzo, wrapping them in its cold embrace. The traveler remained still, his eyes closed in concentration, as if he had already accepted the river's test. But for Nia and Danzo, the path ahead was unclear, the weight of the final trial pressing down on them like an anchor. Suddenly, the surface of the river began to shimmer, a soft glow beginning to form just beneath the water. The light danced, swirling around them in spirals, taking on shapes that were at once beautiful and unsettling. For a moment, Nia thought she saw figures, familiar faces, people she knew from her past. The water around them began to take on a translucent quality, as though it were a window to another world. The river was showing them visions, visions of what their lives could be. Nia blinked as the vision shifted. She saw herself standing in front of the king's palace, not as a humble peasant woman, but as the queen, her robes glittering with golden embroidery, a crown atop her head. The villagers bowed before her, acknowledging her power, her status. Her heart swelled with pride and a sense of belonging. In this vision, she was no longer invisible. She was important. She was powerful. But as she watched, she saw the shadow of the mermaid lurking in the background, her glowing eyes watching from the edge of the vision, a reminder that nothing was ever as perfect as it seemed. Nia shook her head and tried to tear her eyes away from the vision. She had seen this before, temptations that promised power at the cost of her soul. The river was trying to pull her into a future of selfish ambition, a future that didn't align with the woman she had always been. "No," Nia whispered under her breath. "This is not my path." But the river did not relent. Instead, the vision shifted again, showing her the people of Azerim, but they were in ruin, their homes destroyed, their lives torn apart. The land was barren, the crops had failed, and the air was thick with despair. She saw herself standing over the wreckage, helpless, unable to protect her people. The burden of her failure crushed her, and she felt her heart sink into the depths of the river, as though the weight of their suffering was her own fault. "Do you see?" the voice of the river whispered, distant yet clear. "This could be the cost of your choices. Power and responsibility are two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other." Nia clenched her fists, trying to block out the vision. It was a cruel trick, designed to make her question her every decision. But she knew, deep in her heart, that this was not the truth. The truth was that her people needed her, not as a queen, but as someone who would fight for them, no matter the cost. The river was testing her resolve, testing her desire for self-worth and recognition, but she refused to let it define her. "I choose to protect my people," Nia said firmly, her voice steady. "Not for power, but for love. Not for glory, but for peace." The river's voice, a mixture of approval and frustration, echoed in her mind. "Very well. But know this, the path you choose will be fraught with hardship. The cost will be great." The light in the river began to flicker, and the vision dissolved. The golden hues dimmed, and the world around her returned to its dark, murky depths. The river's currents calmed, as though it had received the answer it sought. But the weight of its challenge still lingered in the air, the knowledge that the trials were not over yet. Nia turned to look at Danzo. His face was pale, his eyes haunted by whatever vision the river had shown him. He was staring into the water, as if lost in a world of his own. But his lips were set in a hard line, his jaw clenched. "Danzo." Nia called softly, her voice carrying over the quiet water. Danzo blinked, his eyes focusing on her. He seemed to come back to himself, as though waking from a trance. He turned to face her, a shadow of doubt still in his eyes, but there was something else there, too, a sense of determination. "I saw the throne," he said, his voice hoarse. "I saw myself as the ruler of Azerim, but at what cost? The lives of my people. Their trust. The river showed me a future where I ruled, but it came with bloodshed. I would have to make sacrifices I am not willing to make." Nia reached out and took his hand, grounding him. "The river is trying to manipulate us," she said gently. "It will show us what we want to see, what we fear, what we desire most, but we have to stay true to ourselves. Power comes with a price, but the cost of losing ourselves is far greater." Danzo nodded, though his expression remained conflicted. He had been shown the lure of power, and now, he knew the true cost of it. The traveler, who had been silent throughout their ordeal, finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "You have both passed the second trial. But the river is not finished with you. The third trial is the final test, the test of sacrifice. To truly prove yourselves worthy, you must make a choice. A choice that may cost you everything." Nia and Danzo exchanged a look. They had already faced their fears and resisted the temptations of the river, but now they would face something even harder. The river would demand that they give up something dear to them, something they could not live without. The traveler began to move forward, stepping deeper into the water. "Follow me," he said. "The river will show you the final trial. But remember, this is where you must let go of what you hold most dear. Only then can you hope to survive the coming storm." Nia felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know what the river would ask of her, but she knew it would be the hardest decision of her life. With a deep breath, she followed the traveler, Danzo beside her, both of them ready to face whatever the river had in store for them. As they moved deeper into the river, the world around them seemed to disappear. The trees, the sky, the land, all faded into nothingness. They were alone now, surrounded only by the endless expanse of the water, a dark, endless void stretching out before them. The air was thick, suffocating almost, and the silence was deafening. The river's pull seemed to grow stronger, louder, as though it was guiding them, or perhaps preparing them for what lay ahead. Nia could feel her heart racing, and she looked to Danzo, whose expression was just as tense. He too could sense the gravity of the trial they were about to face. They followed the traveler for what felt like an eternity, the water growing colder with each step, until finally, they reached a clearing, a vast, open space where the water stretched out like a vast ocean. In the center of the space stood an island, and on that island, a large stone altar glowed with a pale, ethereal light. The traveler stopped at the edge of the water, his voice grave. "This is the heart of the river. Here, you will face your final trial. To succeed, you must sacrifice something of immense value. Only then will you be worthy of the river's gift." Nia's breath caught in her throat as she looked at the altar, sensing the power that radiated from it. This was it, the final test. She had already given so much to protect Azurim, to stop the warlords, to help Danzo, but now, the river was asking for something more. What would she have to give up to complete the trial? She glanced at Danzo, his face reflecting the same uncertainty she felt. Would they have the strength to make the ultimate sacrifice? The silence around them felt heavy, pressing in on Nia and Danzo as they stood at the edge of the vast water. The heart of the river gleamed with an almost unearthly light, its glow seeming to pulse with life, with power, with promise. But Nia could feel its weight as well. The river had led them to this point, and now it was asking for something more, something that could change everything. They had passed the tests of fear and temptation. They had fought to stay true to themselves, resisting the lure of power and the ghosts of their past. But this trial, the final trial, was different. This was not a test of strength or will, it was a test of their hearts. A test that would demand everything from them. The traveler stood still, watching them closely, his expression unreadable. He had said little since they had arrived at the heart of the river, but Nia could sense that even he was waiting for their decision. Whatever choice they made here would determine not just their fate, but the fate of Azurim and the war that raged outside the kingdom's walls. "You must understand," the traveler's voice broke through the silence, "this is not a test of what you have or have not done. This is a test of what you are willing to lose. To move forward, to claim the river's gift, you must be willing to part with something that you cannot live without." Nia's heart raced as she turned to Danzo, her mind whirling. What could they possibly give up? The river's gift was powerful, too powerful to simply walk away from. But what if the cost was too great? What if the river's price was more than they could bear? Danzo met her gaze, his expression torn, as though he, too, was struggling with the enormity of the decision. He was a man of strength, of duty, but this was something beyond even his capabilities to prepare for. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted softly, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "What if the price is too high? What if we lose everything?" Nia reached out, her hand resting on his arm, offering him a silent show of support. She, too, was afraid. The river had already shown her visions of what her life could be, what she could have. It had tempted her with the power to rule, with the respect she had always craved. It had shown her the pain of losing everything she loved, the loss of her people, her family, her friends. The sacrifice was not just physical, it was emotional, spiritual. But Nia knew what had to be done. She knew that she could not take the river's gift if it came at the cost of her soul. She would not let the temptation of power destroy what she had worked so hard to protect. "We have to choose, Danzo," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. "We can't take the power without the sacrifice. The river won't let us." The traveler nodded. "The river demands balance. For every gift it gives, something must be taken. You cannot hold onto everything. To move forward, you must decide what you are willing to lose." And that will determine whether you are worthy of what lies ahead. The water around them seemed to ripple, the pressure building once more. Nia could feel it, an invisible weight that pressed down on her chest, a force that made it hard to breathe. The river was waiting for them to make the choice. And they could not delay any longer. Nia stepped forward, her heart heavy with the realization that the moment of truth had arrived. She could not afford to hesitate now. She thought of Azurim, of the people who depended on her, who trusted her to make the right choice. They had already suffered so much. She could not let them down. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the cool air, gathering her thoughts. The image of the mermaid flashed in her mind, her cryptic words, her warnings. The artifact that had fueled the rise of Danzo's power. The power that had led them here. She could feel the weight of that decision, the choice that had been made long ago, when she had first found the mermaid in the river. The heart of the river pulsed with an energy that resonated deep within her soul. It was not just an artifact, it was a force of nature, a power that could shape the world in ways they could not yet comprehend. The choice was simple, yet devastating. "Danzo," she said softly, turning to him, "I can't keep the river's gift if it means losing everything I care about. I can't take the power and forget who I am. If the cost is too great, then I will walk away. We will walk away." Danzo looked at her, his eyes filled with conflict. He, too, had faced the temptation of power, the lure of the throne, the chance to rule. But he knew that the path to power was not always a clear one. He had seen the darkness of the river's offer, the cost of taking everything it promised. It would be a path of destruction, a road that could not lead to peace. "I understand," Danzo said quietly. "If the cost is too high, then we will walk away together. The kingdom, our people, they're worth more than power. We can find another way." With that, they both turned to face the altar, the source of the river's power, the artifact that had been the cause of so much pain. The river's energy surged around them, a palpable force that seemed to beckon them toward it. But Nia did not step forward. She could feel the pull, but she resisted. She would not fall victim to the river's tricks. The traveler stepped forward, his voice grave. "You have made your choice. But know this, you have chosen to walk a difficult path. The river's power is not easily relinquished, and your decision will come with consequences. The artifact's magic is tied to the fate of Azurim, and if you choose to let it go, the future of your kingdom may change." Nia and Danzo exchanged a look. They had already come this far, gone through trials that had tested their hearts, their souls. They had resisted the temptations, had stayed true to their mission. They could not give in now. "We choose the future of Azurim," Nia said, her voice resolute. "We choose our people." The traveler nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting a deep understanding. "Very well. The choice has been made." The river around them began to stir, the waters swirling as if alive. The heart of the river glowed even brighter, and for a moment, Nia felt a surge of energy flood through her body, energy that was not just the river's power, but the power of their resolve. It was the strength of their decision, the power of their willingness to sacrifice. And then, the water settled. The artifact, the source of the river's magic, rose from the depths, floating toward them. It was no longer a gift, but a challenge. A challenge that Nia and Danzo had chosen to reject, not because they feared it, but because they had something far more powerful, their bond, their purpose, and their commitment to their people. The artifact hovered before them, its power still evident, but now it seemed to lose its grip on them. The temptation, the lure, faded into nothingness. The traveler turned toward the altar, his face softening with approval. "You have chosen wisely. But remember, the river does not forget. The path ahead will be difficult. The enemies that wait for you are not easily defeated." Nia and Danzo nodded, their resolve hardening once more. They had made their choice, and now they would face the consequences, whatever they may be. They had sacrificed power, but in doing so, they had gained something far greater, their honor, their people's trust, and their future. And that was enough. The river's voice had faded into a haunting silence, but its power still lingered in the air, heavy and palpable. Nia and Danzo stood side by side, their hands clenched in silent resolve as they faced the heart of the river, now resting motionless in the water before them. They had chosen the hard path, the path of sacrifice, and they were ready to face whatever awaited them. But the journey was far from over. The traveler, who had guided them through the trials, stepped back and regarded them with a gaze that was both knowing and unreadable. "You have made your choice," he said softly, almost as if speaking to himself. "Now, the world will know the cost." With that, he turned and began to walk back toward the riverbank, his figure gradually fading into the mist. "Your kingdom is not yet safe," he added, his voice carrying a warning. "The shadows of war grow longer, and the enemies you face are not mere men. You will need more than what you have gained here. You will need strength. And wisdom." Nia looked at Danzo, her heart heavy with the weight of what they had just faced. The river had offered them power, but at what cost? They had chosen not to take it, but she knew that their decision would not be understood by everyone, least of all by those who sought the throne and the river's magic. "We need to get back," Danzo said, his voice steady but laced with the same tension that gripped Nia's heart. "The warlords are closing in. And if we are to have any hope of saving Azerim, we need to be prepared." Nia nodded in agreement, but she could feel a knot of dread forming in her stomach. The war was coming. The kingdom was on the brink of destruction, and they had no way of knowing how the absence of the artifact would change the course of the battle. As they made their way back to the village, the weight of their choice hung over them like a shadow, growing darker with every step. They had not only chosen to reject the power of the river, they had also turned away from the one force that could have given them the advantage over their enemies. The magical artifact, now left behind, had been the key to Danzo's rise in power, and its absence would leave them vulnerable. But Nia knew one thing for certain: they had done the right thing. The people of Azerim needed leaders who would protect them, not for their own gain, but for the good of the kingdom. She would not allow the thirst for power to corrupt them, not even in the face of the coming storm. By the time Nia and Danzo returned to Azerim, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the village. The air was thick with the smell of the earth, the promise of rain heavy on the horizon. But there was something in the air, an electric tension that signaled something much worse was coming. The villagers were gathered in the square, speaking in hushed tones. The sound of the blacksmith's hammer could be heard ringing from the forge, but even Danzo's rhythmic strike seemed muted in the atmosphere of unease. It felt as though everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable. Nia and Danzo made their way to the village center, where the village elder, Yuzo, awaited them. His face was drawn, his eyes filled with a mixture of worry and anticipation. He had known that the kingdom was teetering on the brink of war, but now it seemed as though the storm was finally about to break. "Danzo, Nia," Yuzo greeted them solemnly. "The news is grim. The warlords have united, and they march toward Azerim. Their armies are vast, and they seek the power the river promised, the power that Danzo once wielded." Danzo clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "They're coming for me," he said quietly, though his words were laced with the understanding that it wasn't just him they sought, it was the very heart of Azerim. The warlords were not only after the power of the river, they were after the throne. They sought to dominate Azerim and claim its land for their own. Nia took a deep breath. "We cannot let them take our kingdom. The people of Azerim have already suffered too much." The elder nodded gravely. "The village is preparing for what is to come. But without the artifact, without the magic that had once given us an edge, we are at a severe disadvantage. There is only one way we might stand a chance now: if you, Danzo, can lead the people with the strength of your heart and the wisdom you have gained. It is not the artifact that makes you powerful, but the courage you have shown in your choices." Danzo nodded slowly, but Nia could see the doubt that flickered behind his eyes. He had once relied on the magic of the artifact, the strength it had given him to forge weapons that were like nothing the kingdom had ever seen. But now, with that power gone, he would have to rely on something far more difficult: himself. "I will fight," Danzo said firmly. "For Azerim, for the people. I will not let them fall to the warlords." Nia stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And I will fight with you, Danzo. We've come this far together. We won't stop now." The elder gave them a long, searching look. "Then prepare yourselves. The warlords will not show mercy, and their armies grow ever closer. You have made the choice, but now, you must prove that the kingdom's future lies not in magic, but in the hearts of its people. As the night fell over Azerim, the villagers gathered in the square, preparing for the worst. Torches were lit, weapons were sharpened, and plans were made. The mood was somber but determined. The kingdom would not go down without a fight. But even as the villagers prepared, Nia and Danzo could not shake the feeling that something was coming, a storm far greater than any of them could have predicted. And the warlords, with their dark ambitions and their insatiable thirst for power, were only the beginning. The first sounds of war were distant, like the rolling thunder of an approaching storm. But as the hours passed, the rumble grew louder, more urgent. The warlords were closing in on Azerim, their armies marching across the plains with the force of a hurricane. Their war cries could be heard faintly on the wind, growing louder by the minute. Nia stood at the edge of the village, her eyes scanning the horizon. The sky was darkening, the clouds swirling in a way that mirrored the turmoil in her heart. The river had shown them the price of power. They had sacrificed the magic of the artifact, choosing instead to rely on their own strength, their own will. But now, it seemed as though the cost was greater than they had imagined. Danzo stood beside her, his sword at his side, his face grim but resolute. He had no illusions about the battle ahead. The warlords were merciless, and they had one goal, to destroy everything Azerim stood for. But Danzo had always known that his strength would come not from magic or weapons, but from the people he fought for. "We've made our choice," he said softly, his voice steady. "Now, we fight for them." Nia nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "Together, we will protect Azerim." And so, they stood side by side, watching as the shadows of war closed in on their kingdom. The battle for Azerim had begun, and they would face it with everything they had. The morning was cold and gray, the sky thick with clouds that seemed to hang like a heavy blanket over Azerim. The distant sound of drums echoed across the plains as the warlords' armies approached. Their march was slow but relentless, a crushing tide of soldiers and war machines, coming to take what they believed was rightfully theirs. Nia stood in the village square, her eyes scanning the horizon. Her heart thudded in her chest as she looked to the mountain paths where the warlords' forces would soon arrive. She could already hear the faint clash of swords, the echoes of distant shouts growing louder with each passing moment. Her hands trembled, but she gripped the spear tightly, finding comfort in its familiar weight. The air felt charged with tension, the calm before the storm. Danzo stood beside her, his face grim but determined. He was no longer the blacksmith who had once forged weapons in the royal forge. He was a leader now, a warrior ready to defend his home. His strong arms were filled with the strength of the people he fought for, and his eyes burned with the resolve to see Azerim safe. "We've trained for this," Danzo said, his voice low but firm. "We've prepared. It's time to put everything we've learned into action." Nia nodded, her gaze steady. The villagers had worked tirelessly over the past few days, reinforcing the walls of the village, setting up defensive positions along the pathways leading to Azerim. The river had provided no magic this time, no artifact to grant them power. But what they had was something stronger: courage, unity, and the will to protect everything they held dear. "We'll fight as one," Nia replied. "Azerim will not fall." The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of earth and rain. The warlords' forces were getting closer, and Nia could see them now, dark figures on the horizon, the shapes of their soldiers like a swarm of locusts descending on the land. The battle was about to begin. The first wave of the warlords' forces arrived just as the sun broke through the clouds, casting a pale light across the battlefield. The soldiers were organized, their armor gleaming in the dim light, their spears and swords raised in unison. They moved with the precision of an army well trained in battle, their discipline a terrifying reminder of the destruction they would bring. Nia and Danzo stood at the forefront of Azerim's defenses, their eyes locked on the incoming forces. They had no illusions about the battle ahead. It would be brutal, unforgiving, and filled with sacrifices. But they would not retreat. They would stand their ground. The first clash of weapons echoed through the village as the two sides collided. The sound of metal on metal was deafening, a constant cacophony that filled the air as the warlord's soldiers surged forward, charging into the heart of Azerim. Nia fought with the ferocity of a woman who had nothing left to lose. Her spear was an extension of herself as she cut through the enemy ranks, her movements swift and precise. She had trained for this moment, learned the art of battle from the best warriors in the village, and now it was time to prove her strength. Danzo was a whirlwind of power, his sword flashing through the air as he cleaved through the soldiers before him. His strikes were clean and powerful, each one a reminder that the people of Azurim would not go down easily. The warlords might have numbers, but they did not have the heart of a kingdom. The ground beneath them shook as the warlords' battle cries rang out, and soon the entire battlefield was a blur of movement and chaos. Nia could see the faces of the villagers around her, their eyes filled with determination as they fought side by side. They were not just defending their homes, they were defending their way of life, their future. But as the battle raged on, Nia could feel the tide of the war turning. The warlords were pushing forward with an overwhelming force, their numbers almost impossible to match. For every soldier that Azurim's defenders took down, 2 more seemed to appear in their place. "We need to hold the line," Danzo shouted, his voice booming above the noise of the battle. Nia's heart sank. They were holding their own for now, but she could see the exhaustion beginning to take its toll on the villagers. The warlords had more resources, more men, and they were relentless. Azurim was small, and its defenses were limited. Just then, Nia spotted a familiar figure in the distance. It was Yuzo, the village elder, standing at the edge of the battlefield with a group of warriors. His eyes were narrowed in concentration as he watched the battle unfold. "Yuzo!" Nia shouted, her voice barely reaching him over the noise of the clash. "What are you doing? Get back to safety." But Yuzo didn't respond. Instead, he raised his hand, signaling to the villagers around him. As if on cue, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and the earth itself seemed to stir. Nia's eyes widened in shock as she realized what was happening. The river. The river was responding. A great surge of water began to rise from the ground, twisting and curling like a living serpent. It was as though the river itself had come to the aid of Azurim, bringing with it a tide of water that rushed toward the battlefield. The water, once still and silent, now surged with incredible force, swallowing the warlords' front lines as it poured over them. Danzo stood beside Nia, his mouth agape in disbelief. "How is this possible?" "It's the river," Nia whispered. Yuzo must have called upon its power. As the water engulfed the warlords' soldiers, their ranks faltered. The force of the river's power was too great, too overwhelming. The warlords' soldiers struggled against the current, their armor and weapons no match for the raw power of nature. But even as the river's magic surged, Nia knew it wouldn't be enough to turn the tide of battle. The warlords had forces beyond their comprehension, reinforcements, siege weapons, and more. "We can't rely on the river alone," Danzo said, his voice grim. "We need to push forward." Nia nodded, her eyes sharp. "We fight for Azurim. For the future of our people." With renewed determination, they surged forward, rallying the villagers to continue the fight. The river's magic had given them a brief respite, but the warlords were still coming. They needed to end this now, before their enemies could regroup and launch another attack. The clash of swords, the screams of battle, and the pounding of feet on the earth were all that filled the air. Nia and Danzo fought side by side, each one pushing forward with every ounce of strength they had left. But in the distance, through the smoke and chaos, Nia could see something that made her blood run cold. The warlord's leader, a towering figure dressed in dark armor, was making his way toward the heart of Azurim. It was him. The one who had orchestrated everything. The one who sought the power of the river's artifact. And he was coming for them. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a blood-red hue across the battlefield. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and smoke. The sound of clashing swords and battle cries had reached a deafening crescendo, as though the very earth itself trembled under the weight of the conflict. And amidst the chaos, Nia felt a cold shiver of dread as she saw the figure of the warlord's leader cut through the smoke, tall, armored, and unyielding. His presence was imposing, like a storm on the horizon, and his eyes, hidden beneath the dark visor of his helmet, gleamed with a dangerous intent. Nia's grip tightened on her spear, and she could see Danzo's jaw set in grim determination beside her. "He's coming for us," Danzo muttered, his voice low but full of the weight of the coming battle. "He knows what we've taken from him. And he's not going to stop until he has it back." Nia's heart pounded in her chest as she looked at the advancing warlord. This wasn't just a battle for Azurim anymore. It was a battle for everything they had worked for, their homes, their people, and their future. The warlord knew that without the artifact, Azurim's people were vulnerable. But he also knew that as long as the artifact stayed hidden, he would never have the power he craved. "We can't let him reach us," Nia said, her voice steely with resolve. "Not now. Not when we're so close." Danzo nodded, his eyes sharp as he surveyed the battlefield. "We need to hold him off. If we can stop him, we can break their ranks. The rest of the warlords will falter without their leader." The two of them pushed forward, weaving their way through the chaos of the battlefield, cutting down any soldier who stood in their way. Their movements were fluid, like a well-practiced dance of destruction, as if they were one with the rhythm of the battle. But the warlord's leader, like an unstoppable force, carved a path through the soldiers with terrifying efficiency. His sword was a blur of motion, cleaving through anything in its path. Each step he took seemed to send a ripple of fear through the enemy ranks, his presence as much a weapon as his blade. Nia felt a knot of tension coil in her stomach. She had fought alongside Danzo, watched as the villagers rallied around them, but this felt different. The warlord was no mere soldier. He was a force of nature, a man driven by greed and power, and his eyes never left Danzo and Nia as they made their way toward him. "You cannot escape me," the warlord's leader called out, his voice booming across the battlefield, sending chills down Nia's spine. "I will take back what is mine, and this kingdom will fall beneath my rule." The words cut through the noise of the battle like a blade. Nia's grip on her spear tightened, and she could see the fury in Danzo's eyes as he drew his sword, preparing for the confrontation that was inevitable. "Azurim will never fall," Danzo shouted back. "Not to the likes of you." With that, the two of them surged forward, meeting the warlord's leader in the heart of the battlefield, where the clash of steel and the cries of warriors filled the air. The moment their blades met, a shockwave of power rippled through the ground, as if the very earth responded to the collision. Nia watched as the warlord's leader swung his sword with incredible precision, his movements like lightning. But Danzo was faster, his strikes powerful and sure. They were locked in a dance of life and death, each blow more intense than the last, the air thick with the sound of clashing steel. Nia's heart raced as she saw the warlord's leader press Danzo back, his sword moving in a series of deadly strikes. But Danzo didn't falter. He fought with everything he had, the strength of a blacksmith, the resolve of a leader, and the fire of someone who would not allow his people to fall. Then, in a flash, Nia saw an opening. The warlord's leader had overextended his swing, his arm exposed. Without hesitation, Nia charged forward, her spear aimed directly at his side. But before she could strike, the warlord's leader spun around, his sword coming up in a defensive arc that deflected Nia's spear and sent her tumbling to the ground. Pain shot through her body as she hit the earth, but she quickly scrambled to her feet, shaking off the blow. Danzo, seeing Nia fall, roared in fury, redoubling his efforts. He swung his sword with such force that the warlord's leader staggered back, a surprised look crossing his face. "You will not harm her," Danzo growled, his voice filled with the fury of a man protecting the one he loved. The warlord's leader laughed, his voice cold and cruel. "You think you can stop me, blacksmith? You are nothing compared to the power I command." But Danzo was not just a blacksmith. He was the heart of Azurim. He had forged weapons for his kingdom, but now, he wielded the strength of his people. With a final, powerful swing, Danzo's sword met the warlord's leader's blade in a clash that shook the very ground beneath them. The impact sent a shockwave through the battlefield, knocking both men back. The warlord's leader staggered, his armor dented and bloodied, but his eyes never left Danzo. "You may have won this battle," he spat, "but you will not win the war." He turned to retreat, signaling for his remaining soldiers to fall back. His figure disappeared into the smoke and chaos of the battlefield, his words hanging in the air like a dark promise. Danzo stood, breathing heavily, his body covered in sweat and blood. His sword was still raised, but the battle was not over yet. He turned to Nia, his face filled with concern. "Nia," he said, rushing to her side. "Are you all right?" Nia nodded, wincing as she stood. "I'm fine. We stopped him. But the war is far from over." Danzo looked toward the retreating enemy forces. "We've won the battle, but the warlords will not give up so easily. They'll be back, and we need to be ready." Nia's gaze hardened as she watched the retreating enemy. "We will be ready. Together, we'll protect Azerim." The sound of the battle began to die down as the warlords retreated, but the tension in the air remained. Azerim had won its first victory, but the true test of its strength was yet to come. After the warlords' retreat, the battlefield fell eerily silent, save for the sound of soldiers tending to the wounded, the cries of the fallen, and the rustling of the wind through the smoke. The villagers had proven their strength, but their victory was bittersweet. The war was far from over. Nia and Danzo stood at the edge of the battlefield, looking out over the aftermath of the fight. Their bodies were bruised and bloodied, but their spirits were unbroken. The sight of their fallen comrades was enough to drive them forward. Azerim would not fall. Not now. Not ever. "We did it," Nia said quietly, her voice filled with exhaustion. "But it feels like there's more to come. The warlords won't just give up." Danzo nodded grimly. This victory was important, but it was only the first step. "We've bought ourselves some time, but we need to prepare for what's next. We need to find the strength to keep going," Nia said, her eyes dark with the knowledge of what was yet to come. Just then, Yuzo approached, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "The warlords may have retreated for now, but they will return. We must be ready to face them head-on, and we need to be stronger than ever." Danzo looked to Yuzo, his gaze firm. "We'll be ready. Whatever it takes." Yuzo gave them a long, knowing look. "There is power within you, Danzo. Within both of you. It is time to unlock it." The wind had settled into a chill by the time Nia and Danzo made their way back to the heart of Azerim. The battle had temporarily paused, but the looming threat of the warlords' return still hung in the air. They had won a significant victory, but it was clear that the war was not yet over. The warlords would return stronger, fiercer, and with more numbers. Azerim needed more than just courage, it needed power. Yuzo's words echoed in Nia's mind. "There is power within you, Danzo. Within both of you." What could he possibly mean? As Nia walked beside Danzo, her thoughts were heavy with uncertainty. The artifacts, the river, the mermaid, what role did they all play in the battles to come? She had always known there was something unique about the river and its secrets, but she had never imagined that she, too, might hold the key to something greater. "Do you think he was referring to us?" Nia asked, glancing at Danzo. Her voice was quiet, uncertain. Danzo's expression was hard to read. He was always a man of action, but now, a flicker of doubt crossed his features. "I don't know," he admitted, "but if there's something more we need to tap into, I have no doubt Yuzo knows how to unlock it." When they reached the village square, Nia noticed the familiar faces of the villagers, now tending to the wounded, making plans for what would come next. Even in the aftermath of the battle, the spirit of Azerim was unbroken. She felt a deep sense of pride. Azerim was a village of survivors. And despite the horrors of war, it was the one thing that could never be taken from them. They found Yuzo standing near the ceremonial fire pit, a place of deep significance to the village. The fire was small but steady, its orange glow casting long shadows on the surrounding stones. Yuzo looked up as they approached, his face unreadable. "You are both here," he said, his voice calm but firm, as though he had been expecting them. He looked at Danzo with a knowing look, his eyes narrowing slightly. "It is time to reveal what you must understand before the next wave of destruction comes." Nia and Danzo exchanged a glance. Without another word, they stepped closer to Yuzo, who gestured for them to sit. The fire flickered in the distance, its warmth a sharp contrast to the chill in the air. The warlord's leader is not just any man. He is the instrument of something greater, a power that seeks to seize the kingdom, not just through force, but through deception, manipulation, and greed, Yuzo began, his voice low, reverberating in the quiet of the night. There is magic in the artifacts, in the water, and in the land. You, Danzo, have been touched by this power. It was never just your skill that won you favor in the king's court or earned the trust of your people. The artifact you carry has begun to reveal itself, piece by piece. Danzo's brow furrowed. But it's not enough. The power in the artifact, it's too dangerous to keep, Yuzo. We barely know how to control it, and the warlords are already hunting us for it. Nia could see the weight of the artifact's burden in Danzo's eyes. He had always been a blacksmith, a creator of weapons, not a wielder of dark forces. Yet, the artifact's power was tied to his success, and its influence on him was undeniable. Yuzo held up a hand, his expression resolute. It is not just the artifact that you must learn to control, Danzo. The true power lies within you. Both of you. His gaze flicked to Nia. The river, the mermaid, it all connects. The magic is in the land, in the water, in the very people of Azurim. But you must open yourselves to it, and you must use that power wisely. Nia blinked, surprised by Yuzo's words. What do you mean? I've never had any magic. I'm just Nia. I'm a peasant, a woman of the land. Yuzo's eyes softened as he spoke. The power of Azurim flows through you, Nia. You've always known it, but you've never truly understood it. The river is not just a source of water. It is a lifeblood that sustains everything. The mermaid, the artifact, these are all pieces of the same puzzle. The magic that connects them is the same magic that flows through your veins. You are stronger than you think. Danzo's eyes widened. You mean to say Nia has powers? Yuzo nodded. Not just Nia. Both of you. The river's magic, once fully awakened, will reveal the true strength that lies within. But the key is balance between land, water, and people. To wield it, you must first understand it. The weight of Yuzo's words settled in the air, as though the very stones of Azurim were holding their breath. Nia's thoughts raced, her mind trying to wrap itself around what Yuzo had just said. Powers within her. She had never felt anything like that, though the river had always felt different to her. But this was something entirely new. How do we unlock it? Nia asked, her voice trembling slightly with a mix of uncertainty and hope. Yuzo's eyes grew distant as if recalling an ancient memory. There is an old ritual, a sacred ceremony of the river. But it is not something to be taken lightly. It requires both of you to unite in purpose. The river will show you what it needs you to know, but only if you're willing to open yourselves fully to its power. It is not just the river that needs you, it is Azurim itself. This is the destiny of your land. Danzo clenched his fists. And if we fail? Yuzo's face hardened. If you fail, the kingdom will fall. The warlords will take everything, and the artifact's power will be used to drown Azurim in darkness. There was no choice. They had to do this. The night had fallen completely, and a silver moon now hung high above Azurim. The villagers gathered near the riverbank, the water glowing faintly in the moonlight, as if it were alive. Yuzo led Nia and Danzo to the sacred stones where the ritual would take place. It was a place of great significance, a site where the land, water, and people had once come together in harmony, a forgotten bond that had been broken long ago. Nia's heart raced as she stood before the river, feeling an unfamiliar sense of power stir within her. It was like a low hum beneath the surface, a pulse that seemed to match her own heartbeat. Beside her, Danzo stood silent, his face drawn in concentration, his grip on his sword firm but relaxed. He was ready, but he too could feel the weight of the moment. Yuzo began to chant in an ancient tongue, his voice low and reverent. The words were unfamiliar to Nia, but they resonated with a deep truth, as if they were calling to something far older than time itself. The river responded, its waters rippling in time with Yuzo's chant, glowing brighter, swirling with an energy Nia had never witnessed before. The magic of Azurim, Yuzo whispered, will reveal itself to you. But you must trust in it, and in each other. As Yuzo's chant grew louder, the river seemed to rise, the water stretching toward them, enveloping Nia and Danzo in its embrace. They both stood still, feeling the river's magic flow around them, through them. It was as though the very essence of Azurim was connecting them, binding them to the land and to each other. Nia's vision blurred as the power surged within her. She felt it, this ancient force, the power of the river, the heartbeat of the land, flowing into her veins. Her body shuddered with the intensity of it. For a brief moment, she could see the river as it had once been, alive, powerful, and unyielding. It had watched over Azurim for centuries, waiting for the right moment to reveal its true potential. And now that moment had come. The river's energy coursed through Nia and Danzo like an electric current. The moonlight above them seemed to intensify, bathing the entire clearing in a pale silver glow. Nia could feel the ancient magic stirring within her, something powerful and mysterious that had always been there, hidden deep beneath the surface of her everyday life. Her connection to the land, the water, and the people of Azurim was not something she had ever understood, but now, as she stood at the river's edge, it was all becoming clear. The water began to swirl around her, a glowing mist rising from the surface. Danzo stepped closer, his eyes wide with wonder. The energy in the air was so thick, it seemed to hum with a life of its own. "Do you feel it?" Nia whispered to Danzo, her voice trembling with awe. Danzo nodded, but his expression was one of quiet focus, as if he were trying to make sense of the incredible forces at play. "I feel it. It's like nothing I've ever experienced." The chant from Yuzo grew louder, his voice resonating with a power that seemed to reverberate in the very bones of the earth. The water around them began to rise higher, swirling like a vortex, forming shapes and patterns in the air. It was as though the river itself was alive, watching, waiting, responding to their presence. Nia felt a pull within her, a call to something deeper. It was the river, urging her to release the power within. She closed her eyes, focusing on the sensation, trying to connect with it. The energy flowed through her hands, her arms, her entire body. Her breath quickened as the magic built up inside her, threatening to burst free. Then, as if on cue, she felt a surge of power that sent her sprawling to her knees. The ground beneath her trembled, the earth vibrating with the force of the river's power. She gasped, her hands pressed to the soil as she struggled to control the overwhelming wave of energy. Danzo reached out to steady her. "Nia. Hold on." I can't," she gasped, her voice barely audible. "It's too much." But then she remembered Yuzo's words, "You must trust in it, and in each other." It was more than just the river's power she needed to control, it was the bond between her and Danzo, the trust they had built between them. She couldn't do this alone. She had to rely on him, just as he had relied on her. Nia reached out, gripping Danzo's hand with a strength she didn't know she had. The moment their hands touched, a new energy surged through them, calmer, more controlled, but no less powerful. It was as though they had become one, their fates intertwined, their strengths united. The river seemed to acknowledge this union, its waters calming as the glowing mist began to fade. The energy in the air shifted, becoming more harmonious, more in tune with their movements. Slowly, the power within Nia began to settle, and she could feel the weight of the river's magic shift from overwhelming to comforting. She had unlocked something deep within herself, something that had always been a part of her but had remained dormant until now. Danzo, too, seemed to sense the change. His grip on his sword tightened, and for the first time, Nia saw a glimmer of confidence in his eyes. They were no longer just two people caught in a battle for survival, they were a force to be reckoned with. "We've done it," Danzo said softly, almost to himself. "Together." Nia nodded, a smile breaking through the tension. The power of the river, of Azurim, was theirs now. They had unlocked something ancient, something profound. But their journey was far from over. The next few days were a blur of activity as Nia, Danzo, and Yuzo worked together to understand and harness the full extent of their newfound abilities. The river's magic had opened doors within them that they hadn't even known existed. Nia found herself more attuned to the land, to the villagers, to the whispers of the wind and the songs of the trees. She could hear the pulse of Azurim, as though the land itself was speaking to her. Danzo, too, seemed to have changed. The energy from the river had sharpened his senses, made him more decisive, more confident in his abilities. The blacksmith's hands, once only skilled at crafting weapons, now seemed to carry the weight of the magic that flowed through him. He could feel the power of the river guiding his every movement, sharpening his focus, making him the warrior Azrim needed. But despite their growing strength, the looming threat of the warlords remained. They knew the peace they had gained was only temporary, and the warlords would return, eager to claim the artifact and Azrim's power for themselves. One morning, as Nia and Danzo walked through the village square, the sound of approaching horses shattered the quiet. A rider appeared on the horizon, galloping toward them with a message. "It's from the king," the rider shouted, pulling his horse to a stop in front of them. He handed Danzo a rolled-up scroll, and Danzo quickly unsealed it, reading the message aloud. "The warlords are gathering their forces. Their leader, Kaon, plans to strike at dawn. They will attack Azrim with everything they have. The king calls on all able-bodied warriors to defend the kingdom. You are needed at the royal castle, Danzo." Danzo's face tightened. "It's time. We knew it was coming." Nia placed a hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. "We will stand with you, Danzo. Together." Danzo nodded, his determination clear. "Yes. Together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the villagers of Azrim began preparing for the impending battle. Nia, Danzo, and Yuzo worked tirelessly to rally the villagers and strengthen the village's defenses. The river's magic had given them new hope, but they knew it wouldn't be enough if they didn't act quickly. The warlords' army was vast, and their leader, Kaon, was known for his ruthlessness and cunning. Azrim would need all the strength it could muster to stand against the coming tide. Night fell, and the village was bathed in a tense silence. Every person in Azrim knew what was at stake. The river's magic could only do so much, it was the courage of the people that would turn the tide. As the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, the sound of war drums echoed in the distance. The warlords had arrived. Nia and Danzo stood at the village's edge, watching the dark silhouettes of the enemy army slowly taking shape in the early morning mist. The time for action had come. "We will protect Azrim," Danzo said, his voice low but filled with determination. "With everything we have." Nia squeezed his hand, her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment they had been preparing for. The fate of Azrim, and the kingdom, rested on their shoulders. The air was thick with the scent of earth and anticipation as the sun rose higher in the sky. Azrim's defenders stood in a line, their faces set with grim determination. The river's magic flowed through their veins, a quiet yet undeniable force that gave them the strength to stand firm against the coming storm. Nia stood among them, her heart racing, yet her resolve unwavering. She could feel the power of the land and the river pulsing in her chest, urging her forward. Beside her, Danzo tightened his grip on his sword. He had never been a soldier, but the magic he now wielded gave him a sense of purpose he had never known before. The artifact, once a dangerous relic, now felt like an extension of himself, a tool that could protect Azrim or destroy it. His decision to use it wisely would determine the kingdom's fate. Yuzo stood at the front, his weathered face calm as he surveyed the scene. He had been preparing for this day for years, his knowledge of the land, the river, and the ancient magic more valuable now than ever. He had taught Nia and Danzo what they needed to know, but now the time had come to put everything into action. The first sight of the warlord's army emerged from the mist, a dark wave of soldiers, warhorses, and towering siege weapons that seemed to stretch endlessly across the horizon. The sound of their war drums reverberated through the ground, a chilling reminder of the destruction they were about to bring. "They're here," Danzo murmured, his eyes narrowing as he studied the enemy ranks. "Kaon is leading them. We'll need to fight with everything we have." Nia nodded, her eyes fixed on the approaching army. The time for fear had passed. The people of Azrim had always known hardship, but they had never backed down. Today, they would not falter. As the warlord's army drew closer, the villagers took their positions, each one armed with weapons forged from the magic of the river. Nia could see the determination in their eyes, their unity stronger than ever. The river's power had awakened something deep within them all, a strength that no invader could break. Yuzo stepped forward, raising his arms to the sky. He called out an ancient chant in the old tongue, a prayer to the river, to the spirits of the land, and to the ancestors who had watched over Azrim for generations. His words echoed across the battlefield, carried by the wind, as though the very earth itself was listening. The river responded. The waters began to churn, rising higher and higher, as though the land was preparing for the battle to come. The villagers felt the surge of power, a wave of energy that ran through their bodies and into the earth beneath their feet. The magic of Azrim was awakening, and they were ready. At the head of the warlord's army, Kaon's silhouette appeared, tall and imposing on his warhorse. His eyes glinted with malice, and his hand rested on the hilt of a sword that seemed to glow with a dark, unnatural energy. He was a man used to taking what he wanted, and Azrim was no exception. "We will crush them," Kaon bellowed to his army, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "This kingdom belongs to us." The warlords surged forward, their war cries shaking the air. The sound of clashing weapons and the roar of warhorses filled the valley as the two armies collided. The battle had begun. The ground beneath Nia's feet trembled as the warlords' forces collided with Azrim's defenders. The roar of the battle was deafening, but Nia could hear the river's magic thrumming in her chest, urging her forward. She held her spear tightly, the energy of the land flowing through her limbs. She was not just a peasant woman today, she was the embodiment of Azrim's strength. At her side, Danzo fought with a grace and power that surprised even him. The magic from the artifact fueled his every move, making him faster, stronger, and more precise. He wielded his sword with the skill of a master, his movements fluid and deadly. The warlord's soldiers fell before him like blades of grass in a storm. But Kaon was not easily deterred. He led his forces with a fury that matched the storm clouds gathering overhead. His men were fierce, ruthless, and well-trained, and they fought with the same relentless energy that he exuded. The battle quickly became a blur of steel, blood, and death, but through it all, Nia and Danzo fought with the conviction that they would not allow Azrim to fall. Nia lunged forward, her spear thrusting into the chest of an enemy soldier. The magic of the river surged through her, her attack swift and precise. Her heart raced as she felt the power of Azrim flow through her, guiding her movements, protecting her from harm. Beside her, Danzo cleaved through the enemy ranks with his sword, his strikes leaving deep gashes in the armor of his foes. He fought with a cold focus, his mind sharpened by the artifact's power, his heart steady with the knowledge that he was defending the kingdom and the woman by his side. "Stay close," he called over the din of the battle. Nia nodded, her eyes locked on him. They were a team now, their bond strengthened by the river's magic, by the shared power that flowed between them. Together, they were unstoppable. But the warlords were not without their own strengths. Kaon fought at the front of his army, leading his men with brutal efficiency. His sword crackled with dark energy, and as he swung it, it left trails of black smoke in the air. His eyes were fixed on Azrim's defenders, a cruel smile on his lips as he saw the chaos unfold. "We will break them," Kaon shouted, his voice booming over the battlefield. His warlords pushed forward, their numbers overwhelming Azrim's defenders. Despite their courage, the villagers were slowly being pushed back, their lines thinning as the warlords advanced. The power of the river was strong, but it wasn't enough to match the sheer force of Kaon's army. Nia felt a surge of desperation rise within her as she watched the tide of battle shift. The villagers were faltering. The river's magic was still with them, but they needed more. They needed something to turn the battle in their favor. In that moment, she felt it, an ancient pull from deep within the earth. The river's power was not just in the water, it was in the land itself. It was in the mountains, the trees, the very soil beneath their feet. Nia realized then what Yuzo had meant. It wasn't just about the river or the artifact, it was about the heart of Azrim, its people, its land. She closed her eyes and focused, reaching out with her senses. The magic was there, waiting for her to unlock it. She could feel the land vibrating with energy, the ancient power of Azrim stirring beneath her feet. "Nia!" Danzo shouted, his voice breaking through her concentration. "The enemy's breaking through. We can't hold them back." Nia's eyes snapped open, and she saw the battle unfolding before her. The villagers were being pushed back, their weapons no match for the warlord's onslaught. The time for hesitation had passed. With a fierce cry, Nia raised her spear high, calling upon the magic of Azurim. The ground shook as the river's power surged, coursing through the land, through her body, and into the heart of the battlefield. The very earth seemed to answer her call, the trees trembling, the stones vibrating with energy. A bright light erupted from the ground, and in an instant, the battlefield was transformed. The earth itself seemed to come alive, as if the land was protecting its people. Giant vines erupted from the soil, wrapping around enemy soldiers, pulling them to the ground. Rocks lifted from the earth, hurling themselves at the warlord's ranks. Danzo watched in awe as Nia's power unfolded before him. The warlord's army was now being overwhelmed by the very land they sought to conquer. The river's magic, the land's magic, had joined together in a force that could not be stopped. Azurim is not yours to take, Nia shouted, her voice ringing across the battlefield. Kaon roared in fury as he saw the tide of battle turn. His soldiers were now scrambling, caught in the grip of the land's wrath. But he wasn't done yet. He had one last weapon, one last chance to claim victory. He raised his sword, and with a dark incantation, he summoned the power of the artifact he carried. The ground trembled as dark energy swirled around him, lightning crackling from his blade. The battle was not yet over. Kaon's sword hummed with a menacing energy, the dark magic within it swirling like a storm. He raised it high, shouting an incantation in a guttural, ancient tongue. The sky above the battlefield darkened as clouds churned, and a violent wind swept across the land. His army, once on the verge of retreat, paused at the sight of their leader's power. The tide had not fully turned yet. On the other side, Nia stood firm, her spear glowing with the river's magic. Her connection to the land was now complete. She could feel the heartbeat of Azurim in every blade of grass, every stone, and every droplet of water. This was not just a battle for survival, it was a battle for the very soul of the kingdom. Danzo stepped beside her, his sword still gleaming with the artifact's power. His face was resolute, his mind clear. Together, they stood as Azurim's last hope, facing down a force that threatened to consume everything. Kaon pointed his sword toward them, a cruel smile on his lips. "You think your little tricks can stop me? I wield power beyond your understanding." A bolt of dark lightning shot from Kaon's blade, aimed directly at Nia and Danzo. Acting on instinct, Nia raised her spear, and the river's magic erupted from its tip in a shield of shimmering blue light. The lightning struck the shield, crackling and roaring as it met resistance. For a moment, it seemed as though Kaon's magic would break through, but Nia held firm, her connection to the land grounding her strength. Danzo, seizing the moment, charged forward. His sword, infused with the artifact's energy, glowed brighter with every step. He swung it in a wide arc, sending a wave of golden light crashing toward Kaon. The warlord barely had time to react, raising his own blade to deflect the attack. The collision of their powers sent shockwaves across the battlefield, knocking soldiers from both sides to the ground. Kaon snarled, his eyes blazing with fury. "You're strong," he admitted, "but not strong enough." He slammed his sword into the ground, and the earth beneath him cracked open. From the fissures rose dark, shadowy figures, phantoms born of the artifact's corrupted magic. They swirled around Kaon, their ghostly forms hissing and writhing as they surged toward Nia and Danzo. The villagers cried out in fear as the phantoms swept across the battlefield, their icy touch draining the life from anything they touched. Nia felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to falter. She gripped her spear tightly, calling on the river's magic once more. "The land will protect us," she said, her voice steady. "It always has." She raised her spear high, and the ground beneath the phantoms erupted with vines and roots, glowing with the same blue light as the river. The phantoms shrieked as the vines wrapped around them, pulling them back into the earth. The villagers, emboldened by the display of power, rallied once more, their courage reignited. Kaon growled in frustration, his plan unraveling before his eyes. He turned his attention to Danzo, who was now closing the distance between them. The blacksmith-turned warrior moved with a speed and precision that belied his humble beginnings, his sword glowing brighter with each strike. Kaon met him blow for blow, their swords clashing in a dance of light and shadow. You should have stayed in your forge, Kaon sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. This isn't your fight. Danzo gritted his teeth, his muscles straining as he pushed against Kaon's blade. It's my fight because this is my home, he said. And I won't let you destroy it. Their swords locked, the energy between them building to a blinding crescendo. Kaon's strength was formidable, but Danzo's resolve was unshakable. He could feel the artifact's power coursing through him, but he also knew it came with a cost. If he wasn't careful, the magic could consume him. Nia, he called out, his voice strained. I need your help. Nia didn't hesitate. She ran toward them, her spear crackling with the river's magic. As she approached, she felt the artifact's energy tugging at her, a dark, seductive force that promised power if she would only reach for it. But Nia knew better. The artifact's power was not hers to wield, it belonged to the river, to Azurim. She planted her feet firmly on the ground and thrust her spear forward, aiming not at Kaon but at the ground beneath him. The earth responded to her call, splitting open and sending a surge of water and light erupting upward. Kaon staggered, his footing lost as the magic enveloped him. Danzo seized the opportunity. With a roar, he swung his sword with all his might, striking Kaon's blade and shattering it into pieces. The dark energy within the sword exploded outward, sending Kaon flying backward. He hit the ground hard, his body limp and his army stunned into silence. The battlefield fell still. The phantoms dissolved into mist, and the warlord's soldiers dropped their weapons, their leader's defeat breaking their will to fight. Nia and Danzo stood side by side, their breathing heavy but their spirits unbroken. The villagers erupted into cheers, their victory hard-won but undeniable. Azurim had been saved, for now. But Nia's heart was heavy as she looked down at the shattered remains of Kaon's sword. The artifact's magic still lingered, a dark reminder of the danger they had faced. She knew the battle was over, but the war for Azurim's soul was far from finished. The battlefield was quiet now, save for the murmurs of the villagers and the groans of the wounded. The once threatening sky began to clear, allowing the warm sun to peek through the dissipating storm clouds. The light illuminated the devastation left in the wake of the battle. The fields were scorched, trees uprooted, and the ground littered with discarded weapons and broken shields. The victory belonged to Azurim, but the cost was steep. Nia knelt by the shattered remains of Kaon's sword, her fingers brushing against the dark fragments. The artifact's energy pulsed faintly, a shadow of its former power, but its presence was unsettling. She could feel its malevolence, a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. Danzo approached her, his sword still glowing faintly in his hand. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We did it, he said, his voice a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Azurim is safe. Nia looked up at him, her expression troubled. For now, she said softly. But the artifact's power is still here. It's not over. The villagers began to gather around them, their faces a mix of awe and gratitude. Elder Abasai stepped forward, his weathered face lined with concern. Nia, Danzo, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. You have saved us. The kingdom owes you a great debt. But the land bears scars that will take generations to heal. Nia stood, holding the broken pieces of Kaon's sword. This artifact, she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. It's the source of all this destruction. Its power is too dangerous. We need to return it to the river, where it belongs. The villagers murmured in agreement, though some looked uneasy. The artifact had helped them win the battle, and its loss felt like surrendering a powerful weapon. Danzo nodded. She's right. The artifact's magic may have helped us, but it's not ours to keep. If we don't return it, it could bring more harm than good. Elder Abasai sighed, his shoulders heavy with the weight of the decision. Then it must be done. But it won't be easy. The river spirits will not take it back without a price. The mention of the river spirits sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Tales of their wrath and capricious nature were well known, and few dared to disturb the sacred waters. Nia squared her shoulders, her resolve firm. I'll take it, she said. The river trusted me once. I have to believe it will again. Danzo stepped forward. You won't go alone. We'll face whatever comes together. Elder Abasai nodded solemnly. Very well. Rest tonight, and prepare for the journey at dawn. The river will demand its due. As the sun set, the villagers began the somber task of tending to the wounded and honoring the fallen. Fires burned brightly in the village square as people gathered to share stories of bravery and loss. The celebration of victory was muted by the heavy reality of what they had endured. Nia sat by a small fire outside her cottage, staring into the flames. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, relief, guilt, and uncertainty. She had saved Azurim, but at what cost? The artifact's power still lingered, a shadow over their triumph. Danzo joined her, carrying a small bowl of stew. He handed it to her without a word, then sat beside her. For a while, they ate in silence, the crackling fire filling the void between them. Finally, Danzo spoke. Do you ever wonder if we're doing the right thing? Nia looked at him, her eyes tired but determined. All the time, she admitted. But I know one thing for sure, that artifact doesn't belong to us. Keeping it would only bring more pain. Danzo nodded, his gaze distant. I never thought I'd be here. A blacksmith, wielding a sword, fighting for a kingdom. It doesn't feel real. Nia managed a small smile. You've always been more than a blacksmith, Danzo. You just needed a chance to show it. He looked at her, his expression softening. And you've always been more than a peasant. Azurim wouldn't be standing without you. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Elder Abasai. He carried a small pouch, which he handed to Nia. This contains herbs and charms to protect you on your journey, he said. The river spirits are unpredictable, but perhaps these will help. Nia took the pouch, her gratitude evident. Thank you, Elder. We'll do our best. Abasai hesitated, then placed a hand on her shoulder. You've already done more than enough. Whatever happens, know that Azurim will always remember your bravery. At dawn, Nia and Danzo stood at the edge of the village, ready to begin their journey to the sacred river. A small group of villagers gathered to see them off, their expressions a mix of hope and trepidation. As they set out, the weight of their mission pressed heavily on their shoulders. The path to the river was fraught with danger, not just from the terrain, but from the spirits that guarded its waters. Nia clutched the pouch of charms tightly, silently praying for guidance. The forest was alive with the sounds of nature, but there was an undercurrent of unease. The trees seemed to whisper, their branches swaying in an unseen wind. Danzo kept his sword at the ready, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. Nia, he said after a while, breaking the silence. Do you think the river will forgive us? She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. I don't know, she admitted. But we have to try. As they approached the river, the air grew colder, and a strange mist began to swirl around them. The sound of rushing water grew louder, and the energy in the air became almost palpable. They were close. Nia stopped, her heart pounding. She could feel the river's presence, its power thrumming through the ground beneath her feet. This is it, she said softly. Danzo nodded, his grip tightening on his sword. Whatever happens, we face it together. Nia stepped forward, the artifact's fragments in her hands. The river seemed to react to her presence, the water churning and glowing with an ethereal light. As she knelt by the water's edge, a voice echoed in her mind, a voice as ancient and deep as the river itself. Why have you come? The voice from the river sent shivers down Nia's spine, reverberating not just in her ears but deep in her soul. It wasn't a single voice but a chorus, ancient and layered, carrying the weight of untold centuries. You carry a fragment of the forbidden. Speak, mortal. Why have you brought this to us? Danzo stood rigid, his sword at his side, while Nia bowed her head in respect. She held the artifact fragments in trembling hands, their faint glow pulsing in time with the river's thrumming power. I come to return what does not belong to us, Nia said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her heart. This artifact has caused great harm to our land. It must go back to where it belongs. The water churned violently, and the mist thickened around them. Slowly, a figure began to rise from the depths of the river, taking form in the swirling mist. The being was otherworldly, its body translucent like water, its eyes glowing pools of blue. It seemed both beautiful and terrifying, its presence commanding awe and fear. The figure regarded Nia with an unreadable expression. "Do you know what you carry, child? Do you understand the weight of its power?" Nia shook her head. "No, but I know it is not meant for us. It has caused suffering in Azerim. I only wish to restore balance." The figure's gaze shifted to Danzo, who stood silent but resolute. "And you, warrior? Do you share her conviction, or do you crave the power it offers?" Danzo hesitated, the weight of the question pressing on him. He thought of how the artifact had helped him forge weapons of unparalleled strength, how it had elevated him from a humble blacksmith to a warrior who had saved his people. But he also thought of the destruction it had wrought, the lives lost, the chaos unleashed. "I crave peace," Danzo said finally, his voice firm. "If returning the artifact will end the suffering, then that is what must be done." The river spirit regarded them in silence for a moment before speaking again. "You carry the heart of Zalin, a relic forged in the depths of the Undersea Kingdom by those who sought to control both land and water. It was never meant to be wielded by mortals, nor to exist on the surface. Its creation was an act of rebellion, a defiance of the natural order." Danzo frowned. "If it was never meant to be on the surface, how did it end up here?" The spirit's expression darkened. "One of our own betrayed us. A mermaid who sought power above all else. She stole the heart of Zalin and fled to the surface, hoping to use its magic to bend the land to her will. But her greed blinded her to its true nature. The heart is not a tool of creation, it is a force of destruction." Nia's breath caught in her throat. "The mermaid. You mean the one I rescued?" The spirit nodded slowly. "She deceived you, child. She sought to use you and the blacksmith to further her goals. Her plans failed, but the artifact's power awakened when you brought it near the river. That is why chaos followed in its wake." Danzo clenched his fists. "If the artifact is so dangerous, why not destroy it?" The spirit's eyes blazed with intensity. "The heart cannot be destroyed. It is bound to the essence of the sea itself. To unmake it would unravel the balance of our world. It must be returned to the abyssal rift, where its power can be contained." Nia exchanged a glance with Danzo. "How do we return it?" she asked. The spirit extended a hand, and the water before them parted, revealing a shimmering portal beneath the surface. "Enter the rift and place the fragments where they belong. But beware, your journey will not be without peril. The rift is guarded by forces older and more dangerous than you can imagine. Only those with pure intentions will survive." Danzo tightened his grip on his sword. "We've come this far. We'll see it through." The spirit's gaze softened. "Your bravery is commendable, but know this, the rift will test not just your strength but your heart's. If you falter, the heart's power will consume you." Nia nodded, determination burning in her eyes. "We won't falter." The spirit stepped aside, gesturing toward the portal. "Then go, children of Azerim. The fate of your world rests in your hands." The portal shimmered with an ethereal glow, its surface rippling like liquid silver. Nia and Danzo stood at its edge, their reflections distorted in the shifting light. The villagers who had followed them to the river watched in silence, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and fear. Nia turned to Danzo. "Are you ready?" He nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." Together, they stepped into the portal. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming. They were enveloped in a cold, weightless void, their surroundings a swirling kaleidoscope of light and shadow. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and an eerie silence pressed down on them like a tangible force. As they descended deeper, the light began to fade, replaced by an oppressive darkness. Shapes moved in the shadows, glimpses of creatures that seemed both alien and familiar. The temperature dropped further, and the weight of the water pressed against them, making every step a struggle. A faint glow appeared in the distance, drawing them forward. As they approached, they saw a massive chasm, a jagged wound in the ocean floor that pulsed with an otherworldly light. This was the abyssal rift, the artifact's true resting place. But the path to the rift was not unguarded. Standing before it was a colossal figure, its body made of swirling water and glinting scales. Its eyes burned like molten gold, and its voice echoed through the void. "Who dares approach the rift?" Nia stepped forward, clutching the fragments of the heart. "We come to return what was stolen," she said, her voice steady despite the figure's overwhelming presence. The Guardian's gaze bore into her, as if searching her soul. "The heart is not easily surrendered. Prove your worth, or face oblivion." The ground beneath them shook, and the darkness around them came alive. Creatures of shadow emerged, their forms shifting and flickering like smoke. They surrounded Nia and Danzo, their eyes gleaming with malice. Danzo drew his sword, its light cutting through the darkness. "Looks like we've got company." Nia raised her spear, its glow a beacon of hope in the encroaching gloom. "We've come this far," she said. "We're not turning back now." The creatures of shadow slithered closer, their shapes flickering like restless flames in the oppressive darkness. They hissed and growled, their voices a haunting symphony that reverberated through the void. Nia and Danzo stood shoulder to shoulder, their weapons glowing faintly against the encroaching malevolence. The Guardian of the Rift loomed over them, its molten gold eyes unblinking. "To return the heart, you must prove your resolve. The rift will test your strength, your spirit, and your unity. Fail, and you shall be consumed by the void." Before Nia could respond, the ground beneath her feet vanished. She felt herself plummeting into an endless abyss, the world spinning around her. Danzo's voice echoed faintly, calling her name, but he too disappeared into the swirling darkness. Nia landed softly on a shimmering surface that rippled like water. She stood in a vast, endless plain of silver light, where the air felt heavy with magic. She looked around, but Danzo was nowhere in sight. "Danzo," she called out, her voice echoing into the emptiness. A figure stepped out of the light. Nia froze, her breath catching in her throat. The figure was a mirror image of herself, but its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its expression was cold and unfeeling. "Who are you?" Nia demanded, raising her spear. The reflection smiled, a chilling curve of its lips. "I am you," it said. "But I am also everything you fear, everything you doubt." Nia tightened her grip on her spear. "You're just an illusion." The reflection's smile widened. "Perhaps. But illusions have power when you believe in them. Tell me, Nia, do you truly believe you deserve to return the heart? Do you truly believe you can bear the weight of what you've done?" "I've done what I had to," Nia said firmly. "To protect my people." The reflection tilted its head. "And yet, the heart has brought destruction to Azerim. You unleashed its power, and now you think you can undo the damage." Nia faltered, the reflection's words cutting deep. She had questioned herself many times, wondering if she had made the right choices. The reflection stepped closer, its glowing eyes boring into hers. "You cannot save everyone, Nia. You are no hero. You are a peasant who stumbled into power far beyond her understanding. If you return the heart, will the spirits truly forgive you? Or will they demand more?" Nia's hands trembled, but she forced herself to meet the reflection's gaze. "Maybe I'm not a hero," she said quietly. "Maybe I've made mistakes. But I won't let fear stop me. If I have to bear the weight of my actions, I will. Because it's not about being a hero, it's about doing what's right." The reflection studied her for a long moment. Then it smiled, a genuine warmth in its expression. "Well said," it murmured before dissolving into light. The plane rippled, and Nia felt herself being pulled upward. Danzo found himself in a cavern of fire and molten stone. The air was thick with heat, and the sound of hammers striking anvils echoed around him. At the center of the cavern was an immense forge, its flames roaring with unnatural intensity. A figure emerged from the forge's light. It was a massive, armored being, its face obscured by a mask that glowed like embers. It carried a hammer, its surface engraved with ancient runes. "Danzo," the being said, its voice a deep rumble. "You are a smith, a creator of tools and weapons. Tell me, what are you willing to sacrifice to protect what you love? Danzo tightened his grip on his sword. Anything, he said without hesitation. The being stepped closer, its hammer glowing brighter. Anything. Even your craft. Your skill as a smith. Danzo faltered. His craft was everything to him, it defined who he was. But the being's question hung heavily in the air. If I must, he said finally, though his heart ached at the thought. The being nodded. Then prove it. A second forge appeared beside the first, and on its anvil lay a glowing shard of the heart. The being gestured to it. Forge this shard into a weapon that can seal the rift. But know this, in doing so, you will lose your ability to create forever. The magic of the heart will consume your gift. Danzo stared at the shard, his mind racing. His craft was his pride, his identity. But Nia's face flashed in his mind, along with the villagers who had fought alongside them. He stepped forward, picking up the shard. If this is what it takes, he said quietly, then so be it. He began to work, the heat of the forge biting at his skin. Each strike of the hammer felt like a piece of his soul being chipped away, but he pushed through the pain. When he finished, he held a glowing sword, its blade etched with runes of power. The being took the weapon and studied it, then nodded in approval. You have passed, it said. The cavern dissolved into light, and Danzo felt himself being lifted upward. Nia and Danzo found themselves back together, standing at the edge of the abyssal rift. The guardian loomed before them, its eyes blazing with intensity. You have faced the trials of truth and sacrifice, it said. Now, one final task remains. Together, you must place the heart within the rift. But beware, its power will resist you. Only your unity can prevail. The fragments of the heart began to glow, their energy swirling like a tempest. Nia and Danzo stepped forward, holding the fragments between them. The ground trembled as the heart's magic lashed out, sending waves of energy crashing around them. Voices whispered in their minds, promising power, wealth, and glory if they kept the heart for themselves. Don't listen, Nia said, her voice firm. We're stronger than this. Danzo nodded, his grip steady. Together. With a final surge of determination, they plunged the fragments into the rift. The energy erupted in a blinding explosion of light, and the voices fell silent. The rift sealed itself, its glow fading into calm. The guardian watched them, its expression unreadable. It is done. You have restored balance. Go now, and may your land find peace. The portal opened behind them, and Nia and Danzo stepped through, their hearts heavy but resolute. When Nia and Danzo emerged from the abyssal rift, the world around them was calm. The once chaotic winds had stilled, and the oppressive darkness that had loomed over Azerim was gone. The villagers, who had been anxiously awaiting their return, erupted in cheers as they saw the pair walking toward the village square. Danzo still carried the glowing sword forged from the shard of the heart, now dormant, its power sealed. Nia held her spear tightly, though her heart was heavy with the memories of their trials. The village elder, a wise and gentle figure named Baba Ease, approached them. His face was lined with worry and relief. You have returned, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. What of the heart? It has been returned to the rift, Nia replied. The balance is restored. Azerim is safe once more. Baba Ease nodded solemnly. You have done what many could not. You faced the greatest of trials, and you emerged stronger. In the days that followed, word of Nia and Danzo's deeds spread beyond Azerim. The king himself summoned them to the royal court to honor their bravery. The court was filled with nobles, warriors, and commoners alike, all eager to see the heroes of Azerim. The king rose from his throne, his expression one of deep gratitude. You have not only saved Azerim but also protected the entire kingdom, he said. For this, you shall be rewarded. Danzo was granted the title of Royal Protector, a role that would allow him to use his knowledge and courage to safeguard the kingdom. Though his ability to craft had been sacrificed, he found fulfillment in guiding other smiths and teaching them his techniques. Nia was offered a place in the royal council, her wisdom and bravery recognized by all. But she declined, choosing instead to return to Azerim, where she could help rebuild the village and ensure its people thrived. One evening, as Nia sat by the riverbank, she saw a ripple in the water. She tensed, but the figure that emerged was not the mermaid, rather, it was a gentle spirit of the river, its form shimmering like moonlight on water. "You have restored the balance," the spirit said. "The mermaid's actions were selfish, but through her, you found strength. The heart will now rest undisturbed, as it should." Nia nodded, her thoughts turning to the mermaid. "She taught me many things, even if her intentions were not pure. I hope she finds peace in her own way." The spirit smiled. "The trials you faced were not in vain. The strength and unity you and Danzo showed will guide Azerim for generations." With that, the spirit vanished, leaving Nia with a sense of calm. Azerim began to flourish once more. The villagers, inspired by Nia and Danzo's courage, worked together to rebuild their homes and strengthen their community. Nia became a beloved figure, not because of her newfound powers, but because of her kindness and dedication to the people. The kingdom, too, experienced a time of peace. With Danzo's guidance, the royal smiths created tools and weapons that ensured the kingdom was well protected, but never used unjustly. The heart of the Abyssal Rift was never mentioned again, its power sealed and its story passed down only as a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed and the importance of unity. The tale of Nia and Danzo teaches us that true strength lies not in power or possessions, but in unity, sacrifice, and the courage to do what is right. Even when faced with impossible choices, staying true to oneself and working together can overcome the greatest challenges. What would you have done if you were in Nia or Danzo's position? Would you have made the same sacrifices, or chosen a different path? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the mythical land of Azerim. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Turn on notifications to be the first to hear about our next adventure. Until next time, stay inspired and stay curious.